Good evening, Wakefield, and welcome to the school committee meeting on this Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order and note that a small group of us are in studio and that this meeting is being broadcast live on WCAT's Facebook page. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next is a reading of our mission statement. The vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. Next on the agenda is the public comment section. We did receive 4 requests for people to participate in the public comment. So when I call your name, I would just like to remind you to introduce yourself with your name and address, and also remind you that we would like to stay within 3 minutes or less for the public comment. So first on my list is Marcy Silvano.
Hi.
Welcome to our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Marcy Silvano, and I live at 45 Sylvan Ave in Wakefield. And, I'm a multi-generational Wakefield family. I raised my children when my grandfather was raised. Some would call us townies. I prefer to think of myself as a romantic. I walk the paths I walked as a child with my granddaughters. The paths are people etched. I love the same earth they all love. I was not a warrior athlete in school, but my son was a warrior. My son passed away in 2016 of cancer. He was 27 years old. He had the soul of a warrior in him. When I see the logo, I think of my son's happy days on this earth, his young, healthy school years. I tell you this not to bring you a sad story, but to remind you that I, one person, have a strong positive feeling about the warrior. In fact, I have a lot more than just this one. I am the many great-granddaughter of a Micmac chief. Many of us here tonight also are the great-grandchildren of the peoples that lived here before the Europeans came to shore. I am also European. Thanks to DNA technology, I can tell you that I'm Asian and African and much more. So who am I really? What box should you put me in? Do I even have a choice? How do you choose what box gets to be offended? I listened to the panel of Native Americans in the last meeting. I listened 3 times. My heart hurt for them, not because I aligned with them, but because their heart hurt, and that made mine hurt. But I did not resonate with the why in the way they hurt. Our logo was chosen by residents of Wakefield and has become part of Wakefield's history. There was no malintent for choosing the logo of a warrior chief. The logo does not depict the Native Americans from the lands of Wakefield because the logo was not about fishermen and hunters. It was about America's warrior chiefs. The logo choice was about integrity, the willingness to be fierce, yet fair. All humans are imperfect, all races, all religions, all governments, all people. We chose to pull out the perfection of what we saw and believed in. The warrior chief was a perfect man, honored and esteemed in our town. We chose this warrior logo. We had a family in our town that created headdresses, shoes, and jewelry from many nations, and they shared them with us. We began a tradition of inclusiveness. We didn't feel ridicule or bemusement for Native Americans. We felt their strength. Our hearts started to learn their hearts. We began to grow. Lessons were being seeded. The warrior is only shameful to those choosing to see it that way. It seems similar to low self-esteem. It's hard to see your beauty when you continue to put forth poor words about yourself. I wish for you to share the beauty. You can no longer put us in neat little boxes. Our DNA just doesn't fit anymore. The story is in the Earth's growing population. The trip to the Americas was inevitable. Someone was always destined to these shores. I wish it could have been different, but my wish is not worth much. It's time to accept the inevitability of that destiny, accept who we are now, and educate our children of the ugly, of the good, of all that got us here today. And let us do this without shame. Our children do not deserve that shame. I like to believe that our Native American ancestors had a lot to do with changing who we once were by possibly being the best in all of us. So that box some people try to keep me in doesn't fit. It hasn't fit for a very long time now. It certainly doesn't fit our children. If I am not allowed to be me, but I must be boxed into the box of my ancestors, that I am the persecuted and the persecutor. Which part of me do you hear? I hope you care about my heart as much as I care for yours. The vote is not yours, it is ours. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Next on the list is Elena Cordino. I think you're
Can you
muted.
hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Elena Cordino, 4 Swansea Road. The logo is such a sensitive and passionate issue for private citizens and Native American students in the Wakefield community and the Baird family. I believe the discussion about the Native American logo being brought to the school and the town level has promoted racism and a biased negative attention or against the individuals or groups or beliefs within the community through covering the controversy. And this initiative should have encouraged and directed the students to take this to a higher level outside of the town. It's very unfortunate that our school committee has to focus so much energy on this. And friends and neighbors are fighting over this because some feel it might be have pushed them to fight over it. I firmly believe that encouraging the students to seek this at a state level would have possibly encouraged them and been more educational and maintain more civility locally. Taking this on has forced the school committee to spend enormous amounts of time on this. There's issues, the issues are not an argument that need to be presented locally at this time. There are many other issues in the community that need to take priority, and there's never been an emergency in education like this right now due to the COVID pandemic. A parent that may need assistance from the school committee may feel intimidated to reach out by reading all of these negative and comments to the committee, and they might be prohibited from speaking out to the school committee for help. Approaching it in this way may impede the committee in their ability to work on real issues and facing us due to the pandemic. And there are many citizens and Native Americans that believe keeping this imagery honors Native American people, supports nostalgic feelings. It's important to note that the Native American imagery is not offensive to all Native Americans. Some Native Americans take pride in the imagery, and there are some Native Americans and private citizens that feel removing the imagery is wrong and will result in erasing the Native Americans from history. In closing, this issue was brought forth to remove an image that proposed to cause hate, racism, and name calling. So far, I've witnessed the topic has caused pain for those pro and con in our community. The burden of inheriting that hate should not be put on the school committee. Thank you for listening and allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Elena. Next on the list is Star Dancer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Kanishi Kwalkuman. My name is Star Dancer. I'm Native American. Even though I wasn't born and raised in Massachusetts, I was born and raised in New York, but my homelands include Massachusetts. I'm from 3 nations, the Wappinger Nation, the Schaghticoke Nation, and the Pokanoket Nation, the original tribe of Massachusetts. I am the Northeast representative for the Native American Guardians Association. Wakefield, Massachusetts is the land of the Pawcatuxet Native Americans along with other neighboring tribes. This conversation is not about politics, so I ask you all to put your political differences aside as you find a solution. Many Native Americans, including myself, see this as another genocide, but this time it's being done by academia. I am fighting this issue because it's about the future of all children, especially Native American youth. It breaks my heart to hear children say these words to me many times throughout these past few months. Why are they trying to get rid of us? That statement is coming from Native youth, especially some of my cousins. That truly breaks my heart to hear. I am asking the Wakefield School Board and community to do what's right for the youth and the future generations to come. The right way to go is keeping the Wakefield logo and warrior name. As long as it's depicted in the right way, it is always an honor. We don't have much left. So if you take away this, it's damaging to my people in many ways. Out of respect for Mr. Bard, I know him as well. His family and all Native Americans on the northeast side of the United States do the right thing for us. You will be causing more harm than you even know if you take it away. I pose this question to you all here today. Why would you get rid of something that Mr. Bard, a Native American elder, created back in the 1940s? There are more pressing issues at this moment that face our tribes on a daily basis. Native Americans are warriors, and we always will be. We have the highest percentage of Native American people in each military branch serving in the United States and in all past wars. I would like to offer my services as a future educator to the Wakefield School District and community to implement lessons on the true history of Native Americans in Massachusetts and beyond. My life motto that I live by every day is to preserve all Native American history, save the land for our future generations to come, educate on Native American history, do not eradicate. Don't judge one's way of life if you haven't walked in their shoes. Be kind and be respectful. It really isn't that hard. I would like to close by leaving you all with this statement. I encourage you all, before you ever speak to someone or comment on any social media, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Anishink.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. And last is Will Cavanaris. Welcome, Will.
Hi, everybody. My name is Will Carvanaris, and I'm the proud president of the Wakefield Education Association. One of the objectives of the Wakefield Education Association is to promote an environment of educational excellence. Those words strike a new chord in 2021, especially in light of the panel last week featuring many Indigenous people. As the committee looks at the budget this evening, the executive board of the WEA would like the committee to find money in the budget to address this situation. This work would solidify the committee's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of the district's work. The WEA would like to partner with the school committee in this area in order to make sure that all students are welcomed in all of our schools.
Thank you, Will. I'm not sure if you guys can hear us right now, but the fire drill is going off. So stand by. I'm not really sure how we're going to handle this situation.
Exit the studio?
Yeah, I think we're gonna stand by. We will be back hopefully in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
This year will never, ever end, people. Never, ever end.
Hi, Wakefield, welcome back. No emergency at the high school, everything is under control. But I would like to have Will, if you wouldn't mind rereading your statement. We did not get to hear you, so thank you so much.
Of course. So, my name is Will Carvinaris, and I'm the proud president of the Wakefield Education Association. I promise my comments are not that incendiary. One of the objectives of the Wakefield Education Association is to promote an environment of educational excellence. Those words strike a new chord in 2021, especially in light of the panel last week featuring many Indigenous people. As the committee looks at the budget this evening, the executive board of the WEA would like the committee to find money in the budget to address this situation. This would solidify the committee's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of the district's work. The WEA would like to partner with the school committee in this area in order to make sure that all students are welcomed in all of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next on the agenda is the student advisory. And I do think we have Maggie and Logan. Yes. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hi.
Hope you guys are doing great. What's happening at the high school?
Okay, so I can start. Over this last weekend, Miss McLeod actually sent out an email to families first and then to the students about the changes in the hybrid model schedule in the coming weeks and coming months. So she will elaborate on that more tonight, and also kind of in terms of like different sports and like music going on at the high school. The fall 2 season had most of their first events, meet, games and stuff this past weekend. And within school classes, there is the ability now for some limited music practice time between like choir and band. So that's pretty exciting. And now I'll pass it to Maggie.
Yes, thank you, Logan. So what I have for you guys to say, so the guidance counselors, the last few weeks we've been doing course selection. So the guidance counselors have a meeting with students for the past few weeks to review course selections and solidify everything for next year so they know what they're doing. And then also tomorrow, I know most of the juniors are taking it. There is an SAT at school, so that is what will be happening tomorrow. And yeah, pretty much that's all we got.
Thank you, Maggie. Does anyone have any questions for our student advisors? Oh. I am not seeing any questions. I just have one in regards to the course selection. And I should know this because I have 2 high school children. But the timeline, do you guys know what the timeline is for that?
I'm not sure about like the exact timeline. I do know that we have been submitting our courses, like the official courses that we want to take. So we should be getting, I think it will be an email this year. They might have said that to us, and for the parents to okay everything, and then they'll probably go ahead and do schedules like summer.
Okay, great, thank you. Right. Yep, that sounds about right. Well, if no one else has any questions or comments for our student advisors, thank you so much for joining. And I hope you guys have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Under chair comments, I know that Superintendent Lyons and Kara have a lot of information that they want to provide to us, so I will yield my time in order for them to do that. So I will pass it.
Consent agenda?
Oh, consent agenda. Thank you.
You skipped me tonight.
Look at this. I apologize.
That's okay.
I should put the glasses on the face. Okay, do we have a consent agenda?
We do. Except that I'm looking at the agenda, so hold on a second here. Move that the school committee approve the minutes of the school committee meeting of February 23rd, 2021, and accept the minutes of the school committee student services subcommittee meeting of March 3rd, 2021, the minutes of the school committee finance and facility subcommittee meeting of March 4th, 2021, and the minutes of the school committee policy and communication subcommittee meeting of March 5th, 2021, as presented.
Second?
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote?
Ms. Purcell,
Yes.
Ms. Baer,
Yes.
Mr. Markham,
Yes.
Ms. Guida,
Colleen's having trouble getting back online, so she said she's waiting to be let back in. She was having some Wi-Fi problems, so she'll be on in a second.
okay. Mr. Boudreau,
Yes?
Dr. Burns,
Yes.
Mr. Liakos.
Yes.
And Judy, I see Colleen now
Oh, Ms.
Oh.
Guida,
for the consent
Hi.
agenda.
My network went down with the fire alarm, apparently. Yeah, what am I voting on?
Oh,
Sorry.
consent agenda.
The consent agenda. I thought
Just
you
say
could
yes.
hear us,
Just say
but
yes,
we
Colleen.
couldn't see you.
I'm not saying yes. Okay,
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Lyons.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to start off, I'd like to hold my comments until the end, and I'd like to move to the next item on our agenda, which is the FY22 budget, and just to kind of give an update. So we have presented our budget here. We've proposed it to school committee. We've presented to FinCom. We've presented to town council. We've also had a public budget hearing to get feedback on the information that we have presented. We think it is a sound budget, a fiscally responsible and a sustainable budget. The increase that we are seeking is a 4.88% increase over last year, for a total of $45,703,200. And I'm going from memory here. I don't have it right in front of me. Am I close there, Christine?
That was perfect, Doug.
Okay. And so we're wondering, Christine and I, if we can provide any feedback or answer any questions for the school committee before any motions are made in regard to supporting the budget. Michael?
Yeah, Doug, I was just curious. You've obviously been in front of quite a few folks. Any noteworthy questions that we'd want to know about that came up that you had to address?
Yes, FinCom is remarkably consistent in their questions. They are always curious about the kind of the year-over-year costs, and our number of full-time equivalents or personnel that are employed through our 7 bargaining units. They primarily focus on the teacher's contract, because that is kind of where the budget is really kind of the majority of it goes. And so we got questions from FinCom around the increases that we're seeking this year. We did share that we were looking at 6 COVID-related positions. The FinCom asked if would those be positions that will only be budgeted for this year? And the answer to that question was yes, right? And we also got a similar question with town council, but the comments that we got at both FinCom and town council, I think were very positive and supportive of the budget and the proposal.
Thanks, Doug. I do. I think it's a responsible budget as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Doug, we had a couple of questions at the community forum. One that was about the
Playground?
the playground, and that
Yeah.
it was reported in the item as 140, and it was in our document as 190.
Yep.
Can you comment on that one?
I can. So while that question was being asked by Stephen Ingalls, I was emailing him back. So we've already exchanged some information. And so the budget line in capital was initially $190,000. In talking with Joe Conway, the corrected amount was $140,000, and that wasn't cut. Joe had said that the more accurate quote that they got to do the work was $140,000, and that would cover ADA accessibility, it would cover resurfacing, and it would cover a new play structure. And so Stephen also had some additional questions, and I think we're gonna kind of align him or come up with Bob Shiroli just to talk more about enrollment, design of the play structure, and size of the play structure based on the enrollment. So those were the questions that we had at that time that I think we had addressed through email,
Okay.
right?
And then another question that I've had, I believe came up at the forum and then has come up a couple times, is just around how we plan to support social emotional learning for students as we kind of know that as kids get back, those needs are going to increase. One of the things that I really got a lot out of in the conversation that we had when Mr. Cedrone and others from the support teams came and spoke to us, I don't know how long ago that was, but a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they talked a lot about one-to-many sessions, right? So that it's not always kind of one-to-one counseling, but they were doing things that you could do at lunch and things that you could do, that you could zoom in at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
that it seemed much more kind of one-to-many, which scales much more effectively from a financial standpoint. So I would just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how the budget supports kind of the assumption that those needs are going to grow, and does it explicitly, or do we just intend to kind of support students through kind of more creative ways of supporting them, which would be more of that kind of one-to-many, one support person to many kids versus the one-to-one model?
So there's probably three parts to that question. And so in regard to how do we intend to support students in regard to social emotional learning or social emotional supports, our principals are working with faculty and staff, and as we're bringing students back, one of the next major steps for us is to get students back into the building to really try to understand what students need, right? On the schedules that we're operating on and not having access and availability to students, it's hard to kind of understand the range of needs that we're hearing about, right? So some we're seeing, some we're hearing about, right? And so I think the first step for us is to get students back into the building on the new schedules. And then for counselors like Andrew Cedrone and the Galvin team, but also like the teams at elementary and the high school, to really start to assess what the needs are as kids come back. And as we kind of learn more about that, we will be thoughtful about, who might have time in their schedule to help out, how are people presenting, do we need to kind of think about, redistribution of resources. And so really the first step for us is getting people back and assessing that need. So right now there's a lot of talk about there's a lot of need, but without kind of qualifying what that means in regard to resources, personnel, and time, right? And so that's the first part of the question. The next part of the question is, we know, and you've heard me say this in our budget presentation, that the work that we're going to need to do in regard to intervention services is going to take and need to be intentional on our part. It's going to need to support students in school and outside of school, okay, for between 18 and 36 months, right, is kind of what we're looking at. So we have started an intervention plan this spring where we're looking at literacy in the summer, and as we get kids back this spring, and as we provide summer service for special education students and for regular ed students, we will be thinking about how we will provide counseling services and any supports that we may need then. So, but in regard to your question about would we do it creatively, the answer is we always try to do it creatively because there's never enough time in the day and there's never enough resources in the day. So we will have more information forthcoming in the spring in regard to our summer program around what intervention academic services look like for regular ed and special ed students, but also what counseling services will look like. So there'll be more information forthcoming then.
Okay. So there is nothing in the explicit budget that is kind of additional resources.
Correct.
Specifically around SEL for kids next year.
Correct.
Nothing explicit. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just add to add to what Doug was saying, just in terms of thinking about SEL support and resources too. I think we often talk about it in terms of counseling and direct service, but there's also a lot more that can be done and that our staff, I think, is regularly doing and will continue to do, just in terms of parent support, troubleshooting, helping parents to, make decisions around outside services, seeking therapy outside of school, where you can really get probably a little bit more in-depth than you can in a school-based session. Also, just thinking about the consultation that takes place from counselors and psychologists to general ed teachers and that back and forth, kind of the behind-the-scenes support that I think takes place in a daily manner, but can't really be captured as a resource or through a budget. So just, because I think we tend to think about through the budget like direct services and positions, but there's a lot of other SEL support happening in different ways.
I would agree. Andrew Cedroni's comment about one-to-many, what we do our best work when we team, right? Suzanne Burns at the high school teams with teachers, right? Our middle school counseling staff they're remarkable at teaming not only with one another, but with the teams of teachers, right? And so our teachers are really, they've been exceptional this year, kind of taking ownership of kids and trying to meet their needs. And so I think that's going to become more commonplace. It's also going to be an opportunity for us as we get a new director of special education to look district-wide at the counseling services and social emotional learning and supports that we have in place. And that includes curriculum as well. So this conversation is far from done. In fact, the next step for us is to get back. And in regard to your comment about there's nothing specifically represented in the budget, what we agree to every year is we will agree to what is known, what is in front of us, right? And so I think we've agreed to what is known. We've budgeted for remote services, right? If there's flexibility there that we can provide that level of support, we will. We will adapt to the needs of children, and we will make it work. And so that's an important piece as well.
Thanks.
Mr. Liakos?
Thank you. And I want to pick up on Susie's point, because I think, I think I had a similar reaction when I was looking at the additional staff that we've budgeted for in the coming year and didn't see specific investments in mental health, social and emotional support. And I know that part of that is because we've been investing in that significantly over the last several years. It's been a district priority for several years. And so I think we've created a much stronger infrastructure of support for social and emotional learning and mental health. But I want to pick up on Susie's sort of encouragement to look more deeply, and Doug, your acknowledgement that this is a part of your plan, and Kara, that part of the plan this year. And I'd like to encourage you to look specifically at the model of the school social worker. Many of you know that my wife was a school social worker in the Revere Public Schools for many years. And just recently, my daughter was hired as a school social worker in the Wellesley Public Schools. And so as I've seen their experiences and learned about their experiences, I'm seeing more and more public school systems here in Massachusetts and elsewhere adopt the social worker as a model to support social and emotional learning and mental health. And the reason that the social worker is particularly effective is because the social worker works at the center of school, family, and community life. And I think this is a particularly resonant role in a year when schools, families, and communities are all under such significant stress. And so I think, especially at the high school and perhaps at the Galvin Middle School, the social worker model may be particularly suited to meet the needs of our district as we think about, how to recover from the long-term effects of the pandemic and learning loss, social and emotional damage that's been done to some of our kids from both learning loss and or health loss, grief, all the things that our students are struggling with at this difficult time. So, so I just really wanted to encourage Doug and the team to look at the social worker model as a potential solution to our long-term mental health and social and emotional learning challenges. Thank you.
Doug, if I may also chime in, part of the ESSER 2 money that we are not just now receiving does have an amount of money set aside for mental health services. It's a smaller portion of the grant, but DESE is recognizing that this is something that not just for this year, but also for next year that we have to focus on. So there is a portion of ESSER 2 that is targeted for that.
Good to know. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, and I just had a quick comment in regards to that, to you, Christine. Are you anticipating maybe additional funding and or grants or, you know, anything that we can possibly anticipate receiving that could focus on the SEL?
So when we have meetings with our school finance guru, Jay Sullivan, he says, I can't see in my crystal ball today, but we do know there's a lot of talk on the federal level about supports for schools. There's a lot of talk, and I know Jim Sullivan is on this call, and FinCom was also wondering about what supports are coming to Wakefield and particularly into education. So we don't know. There's been rumors, there's been estimates of maybe 2 or 3 times what the current ESSER money is, but I would be hesitant to quote a number.
So,
and, can I just add a comment? Doug, Greg, sorry. I just wanted to continue off of your comments too. Just, I completely agree with what you were saying in terms of like having that position around community, family, and school. And I think, you know, I just wanted to point out, I think that Wakefield has made some strides in that area, and I think we need to continue to do more just in terms of thinking about our student support staff and going the route of hiring adjustment counselors, which I think we have probably now at least one at every level, if not a couple. And the adjustment counselor role is very similar to what you described, and often hold that licensure on of a social worker. So right. I think we're heading in that in a positive direction in that way, and I think some of the asks around going the adjustment counselor route is that school psychologists also tend to have the evaluation component part of their job for special education initials and 3-year reevaluations, where the adjustment counselor positions can really focus on that family and community work and counseling pieces only, which I think has been beneficial.
Yeah, and I mean, all of this is really designed to do the kinds of things, well, to support teachers, right, and supporting students, and to help free teachers to focus on curriculum and focus on academic achievement. It's a multi-pronged approach, and it can be, you know, it can be achieved in a number of ways. So I appreciate that, Kara, and you know, leave it up to you to find the right models. But I think that being open and imaginative to the approaches, I think, is warranted this year, given all the demands.
A call today with the Commissioner of Education that there is going to be grant money available for intervention services, for mental health supports. But like Christine said, you know, they have yet to kind of roll this out to us, right? So they're waiting for federal money to come into the state, and then when that happens, it will come to us, right? And so, you know, so more to follow on this. But I think I don't want to miss the opportunity to just close the loop on Greg's comments. It's probable that, you know, we could support through federal money, you know, an FTE or maybe more than one FTE. But again, it's really being, you know, cautiously optimistic, right? And understanding that, you know, and we also want to be thinking about the long term. You know, to bring someone on with stimulus money means that when that grant sunsets, we would be unable to continue the position unless we reallocated or built it into the budget for a following budget cycle. But again, there's still a lot of moving parts. Our next real focus is getting kids back into school and trying to work to scale. That's really where we're at. Michael?
Just one other question, Doug, because you had mentioned the COVID positions and it struck a chord with me. And I believe we talked about the fact that you were looking for some grant money to support those COVID positions. So first of all, correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I am sort of curious if, let's say we were to get that grant money, what would the effective budget increase be if you strip those 6 positions out of the submission, roughly?
The cost for those positions, if you recall from our presentation, is about $360,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, we're talking, it would, the impact to the 4.88%, we're probably looking, Michael, at, it would bring us down around 4.2 and change, right? And so, but again, we want to, again, be thoughtful about how we're spending our grant money, what we're doing, and we're not rushing out and hiring it, without knowing that we have the support, both through the local budget as a primary, and then through our grant money as a secondary. But yeah, so.
Great. So that's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're certainly welcome. Other questions?
I've got one last one, and it's not really a question, but because we're on the topic of budget, I'd love for us at a future meeting to kind of dig in a little bit more on the special ed expenses and really take a look at how much of it is out of district, how much of it is in district, how much have we seen that growing over time. I know I don't have a good sense of what that has looked like in Wakefield over the last 4, 5, 6 years. I know certainly, Amy, when you came in, one of the things you were really keen on was how do we figure out how to support kids in district because it saves us money, right? I'd love to see what have we moved in, how are we supporting kids, because that is a large expense, and I think it's going to be a growing expense over time. I don't think that there's anything kind of in this 4.88 that needs us to go deep on this today before we approve the budget. But I do think it makes sense for us to spend some time as a committee just understanding what that looks like and how are we supporting kids today and how could we be supporting kids better in the future. So that's just an ask for a future meeting.
I think we look forward to the conversation, and I think it's connected to the SEL piece. Yep. It's connected to the new director piece. And so there's a lot of things that are going to start to come together and intersect. I think an important part of that is, I will tell you in the last 3 years, our numbers have been pretty steady, right? And that they haven't, varied dramatically up or down. There were some out of district costs this spring, which are going to require us to access the stabilization fund for FY21, not 22. So it's separate from the budget proposal that we're talking about this evening. But what is up dramatically is the number of referrals that we have right now for special education assessments. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like grave concerns around learning loss, grave concerns around transitions, around, catching up. There's just a lot that people are managing, and there are a lot of concerns. But again, if we just dial it back, right? Our next step is to get kids in school and try to work to scale, right? When I say work to scale, I want to be clear in my communication. What that means is that, when we get back, we're not getting back in pre-COVID schedules. It's like, as Steve Mayo likes to say, it's a hybrid of a hybrid, right? And so, but it will give us an opportunity, right? But it will also zero us, right? It will give us a starting point. And this actually coming back the way that we are, it's challenging, but it allows us to end well, to open well, right? And so I think it's a great opportunity, but enough said there.
One last point I just want to make in the current budget for special ed out of district tuitions, it says that the 4.88, 0.12% of that is to cover increased special ed out of district tuitions.
Correct.
So in the 4.88, there actually is some special ed dollars where we're seeing an increase.
Correct.
You're kind of taking it in as part of this increase versus in our current situation, we're actually, for this current year, we're needing to go to the stabilization fund to kind of help support unexpected expenses that were beyond what we could kind of cover in the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and I want to be clear in what you're saying. So there's a year-over-year cost.
Yes.
So us accessing stabilization for 21 allows us to balance the budget for 21.
Yep.
For the cost that you're referencing in 22 is covered in the 4.88, and we have to account for that as a year-over-year commitment for the out-of-district placement that we've made for some students.
Yep.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to add that this budget does include 3 special ed positions.
Correct.
You know, which is, you know, again, a great step in the right direction because we have been able to consistently do that for at least, you know, we're going on our 3rd year now doing that, which is an improvement. Again, you know, we need a lot more, but it's great to know that we're building the program and we're going to be able to create some services and provide really important services for our students moving forward next year. So
I think a presentation like what you're suggesting in the future, it just will I think make people even feel better about the benefit of investing in high quality in-district special education services when you do the cost analysis of what you need to invest in a program and the number of students you could serve or impact versus, you know, just one out-of-district cost. It's just really, I think it's really interesting to see it all laid out that way. Agree.
I would just also like to chime in that the 3 positions, the principals are on the call and they're so excited because these positions were cut last year. We all know that. And, you know, they made it work, but they really asked for and advocated these positions to come back. So we're just excited that they're in the budget again.
yeah, I agree. Colleen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, still having internet issues. This question might be for Christine or Doug. So, and this is, we've received a little bit of guidance from Senator Lewis's office on this, and they've been trying to give us updates. But I was wondering if you heard anything further from our legislators that are advocating for an adjustment to the SOA Chapter 70 funds, given that they're based on the current enrollment. And our enrollment is ever changing, right? So now that we're moving to a phased in full-time in-person reopening, have we received any more guidance or information regarding the adjustment there? Because our numbers are actually it's not going to be the fall now that they're going to be increasing in current enrollment. We've seen some of our students who have chosen and families who have chosen a remote model opt to choose into our phased in approach to in-person learning.
So there's been some talk about that, but we haven't heard anything concrete. But you're right, Colleen. People, you know, it's a double-edged sword because people were so excited about SOA is finally going to happen. It's going to be phased in over 7 years. But guess what? The enrollment numbers it was based on for this year were lower. So it sounded good. The soundbite sounded good. Yeah, you're getting SOA, but guess what? It's based on a lower enrollment number from the October one from last year. But the legislatures have been advocating for it. But again, I'm watching every day the House and the Senate numbers, and they haven't come out yet. So I think there's a lot of politics that will play into that, as you know, with everything right now. But you know, I guess we're going to have more to come.
Okay. Thanks, Christine.
That our remote students are part of that enrollment, so we have that number covered.
Oh, okay. So for the students that are moving towards a in-person model from their full-time remote model, they're included in the current enrollment.
They are.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Amy. And thank you, Doug and Christine, for leading this, really challenging year. One of the things that strikes me from the finance subcommittee perspective, that one of the things that I think we're probably dealing with that is the hardest are lots of the unknowns. That this is still a year, or next year will still be a year that we'll be reeling a bit from COVID. We certainly hope that a lot will be different, but that's still a big unknown. I wanted to again remind folks that the administration originally produced three scenarios and then really dived into what those type of options would be and what the ramifications of that would be. And then, after a lot of careful thought and planning, and a lot of caution around that planning, we've landed in where we are tonight. I'm certainly prepared to support the budget with an understanding that there are some big unknowns that we may wind up needing to have a conversation either in the fall or the winter of FY22 to revisit some of the very issues that we're talking about tonight. One of the things that concerns me the most, I join my colleagues in being concerned about social emotional learning, is the social emotional sort of health of our students, and that certainly goes without saying. I certainly join in that. In addition, one of the things that I think is really unknown, and I seek to have us have a pretty concrete conversation around what is the learning loss going to be. That has been certainly a pretty lot. It's been a real sort of buzzword in the last couple of months, but it needs to be more than that for us. We need to, I think, roll up our sleeves some in the coming weeks and months and spend some real concrete time around getting a deeper appreciation of that. I know that it's something that's in the hearts and the minds of the teachers and the principals. I'm sure this isn't a new topic, but I think one of the things that we're going to wind up seeing an impact from within the budget is due to some of that loss. And what if students that are coming back in September in an entirely full-time model, or at least mostly anyways, right? What is the impact going to be of that? I mean, and I think that combined with social emotional piece is really going to be a setback for a lot of students. I'm pleased to see the additional, SPED supports, special ed supports, and the additional, the remote positions that we need to carry forward. But I remain concerned about that. I look forward to working with the rest of my committee the committee members, the administration, and the WEA on coming up with some really structured ideas around coming up with some benchmarks and measurements around learning loss. That concerns me a lot, and I think we're going to be revisiting budget impacts come the fall around exactly that. With that in mind, I certainly join in thanking our partners at Town Hall in being open and appreciative of the type of challenges that we're facing. I think we've had some really good conversations with the Finance Committee and the Town Administrator that have helped us get to a place where we are today that's working within, certainly appreciate the limited means that we're all working toward, but to be able to see this type of growth in some difficult times is encouraging and much appreciated. And I think we can't go without saying that the strong relationship between the school district and town administration, while we may or not always agree on everything, we always land in a place that is appropriate with the best need for students in mind, and that's something for all of us to be proud of. So I support the superintendent's budget. I thank for the amount of work that's gone in to bring us to this night, and I look forward to working on the type of things that we've all been talking and sharing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Does anyone else have any questions and or comments regarding the budget? I am seeing none, so do we have a motion?
Move that the school committee approve the superintendent's FY 2021-2022 budget as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Ms. Bayer?
Yes.
Mr. Markham?
Yes.
Ms. Guida?
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau?
Yes.
Dr. Burns?
Yes.
Mr. Liakos?
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you. I couldn't be happier, and I fully support this budget as well. So looking forward to getting to work next year anyway and implementing these services and this money to that.
Thank you so much. I'd like to give a special thanks to Christine Bufagna.
Yep.
And to our Director of Special Education, Lynn O'Neill, and to Kara Morrow in the construction of this budget. And of course, to our principals for putting together their school-based budgets and doing so thoughtfully a job in constructing that. So thank you very much. So thank you. Next up for us, we'd like to talk about the changing elementary and middle school schedules. We have a very brief slide deck that we'd like to share. You want?
Okay. So tonight we have our principals here from every level, and we'll get into some updates. But first, we listed again our phases for reopening, just again to just highlight for the community the different phases that Wakefield Public Schools have gone through since planning our return last spring and summer. And really, each phase builds on the next. And while it might, feel like, I think we all were surprised by the timelines coming quicker than maybe we thought. We have been thinking about this fourth phase, throughout the year and really trying to make it so that we could be as consistent as possible and, make it seamless for our students when we did move to that option. But before we get into the updates, Doug and I just wanted to hit on a couple of topics of interest. We've been getting, emails. We've had our community Zoom meetings where people have asked questions, and we thought it might just be informative to just touch on a couple of topics that we've gotten a lot of questions on. So I'll let Doug start with the first couple of bullets.
Sure. We've gotten some questions about pool testing and the possibility of using pool testing as a mitigation strategy, a safety and mitigation strategy as we welcome students back. And I know that the state has kind of made a suggestion that districts could do this. And what I just want to be clear in regard to the work that we've done. So every strategy that's recommended is investigated thoroughly, right? And so we looked into pool testing. We have relied heavily on our medical experts and our personnel. We've relied on our health and our nursing staff. We've talked to the Board of Health. We're also looking at other places that have been doing pool testing for a longer period of time. Watertown, for one, Watertown Public Schools has been doing pool testing since the fall. They were one of the first districts. They had someone in their district that had a relationship to a lab in Cambridge. They were able to stand this up very successfully, very quickly. I don't know if the superintendent would say very quickly, but I think that they did it quickly, thoughtfully, and thoroughly. And I think it became part of what they were doing. The difference between that program and what has recently been rolled out and recommended by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, I think that there's a couple of challenges in their plan, right? And so pool testing, which happens frequently at private schools and colleges, right? It's a cost-effective way to be effective and efficient in your response to tracking and responding to the spread of the coronavirus. And so it works well, but the plan, it works well when participation rates are high, right? And so if, for example, the premise is that if 100% of a class, if they're testing once a week, and we have a positive pool, you could take that pool offline, you could quarantine that group, you could get them a secondary test to figure out who in the group is positive, if they're close contacts, and then respond accordingly. The difficult part is when not a large number of people are participating, what you have is this variance. You don't know where the transmission might have started, and it becomes very difficult to contact trace, and it does not have the protective effects that it was designed to have when participation rates are low. So in kind of debriefing with our nursing staff, who are very, very plugged into other districts and other nursing staff and boards of health, we've gone through this, we've discussed this very thoroughly, and the guiding questions for us is, if participation is low, and kind of where we are in the calendar with vaccinations on the rise, and while we're looking at other districts, about half of the districts in the Middlesex League are pool testing. And what the superintendents in the Middlesex League who are doing pool testing are reporting is their numbers are declining rapidly. So there's less of an appetite or interest to continue to participate in pool testing. So when we take all of these factors together and we look at our guiding questions, would this make us more effective and efficient in kind of battling against Corona? 1, does it make us safer? 2, and when we went through that and looked at, what it would take to stand up a program and the benefit and kind of the appetite for people to participate based on the rollout of the vaccinations and how people are feeling and the reopening of the economy, all of that information in concert with all of the data points, we just really felt like it was not the best decision to make at this point in time. And that's not to say that we're closed to it forever. That's not it at all. But I think at this point in time, I think people are really focused on getting back to school. I think families that have had the virus, by and large, have recovered well. And I think people are just really focused on getting back to school and adults getting vaccinated. That's kind of where we are right now. And so I'll be happy to talk more offline about that. The other topic that has come up is quarantine protocols. And so as we start to think about our reopening or inviting or merging of cohorts and inviting all of our students back together, we're going to be bringing students closer together. The CDC has changed the guidance from 6 feet of social distance to 3 feet. So that's going to allow us to increase the density of our classrooms and welcome more students back. So at 3 feet, the question comes up, so what does that mean for quarantine protocols? What do you do? Will that mean that more students might need to quarantine? And the answer is yes, right? We're anticipating that CDC will also have an update because they've dropped their distance to 3 feet. We're anticipating that the CDC will also have an update in regard to quarantining principles and some guidance there, but we have yet to get that. So without that information, we will continue to use the standards that we've used in the past. If someone's positive and they come in contact and they're at a distance of 6 feet away, so distance and time, 15 minutes or more in a 24-hour period, we will consider them a close contact, and that person or persons, plural, would need to quarantine for 7, 10, or 14 days, depending on their testing and the guidance that we get from the Board of Health and our school nurses. So that's an important piece. And student learning time is kind of the next question that we're getting, and so there's some impatience that's happening around, if elementary's getting back, why can't we get middle and high school back on the same timeline? And so a couple things there. I'll speak to the high school in one moment, but in regard to the middle school, so first, in regard to the transmission of the virus, it's least prevalent in our youngest students. And so it's least prevalent. In terms of transmissibility, we're seeing that the lowest transmission rates are also happening with younger students, right? With our older students, you just saw on the news, Swampscott High School went out and they had to shut down for a little while. I think they came back in some students, there was some activity outside of school, but due to kind of high transmission rates, they needed to quarantine, right? And so we're looking at elementary first because we feel like we can get them in the quickest. There's the greatest need. Remote learning affects our youngest students and our most vulnerable young students differently than middle school students and high school students. I want to be clear in that I'm not saying that it doesn't affect our middle school and high school students. It just affects them differently. It also affects families differently. So our first audience are our elementary school students. Our next audience is middle school, and then the audience following that will be the high school. And the later timeline for the high school and for the middle school will give us a greater opportunity to get more people vaccinated, which makes a difference for us in regard to our return. So those are significant things that I feel like I can't stress enough.
One of the other topics that has come up is just with our full in-person schedules, which we communicated last week, that there is some concern around the arrival and dismissal times at each level being close together within a 10-minute window. And, we fully recognize that and, acknowledge that, especially for parents of students with siblings can be a hardship. And we've talked about that as an administrative group and just needing to be compassionate to work with families. The arrival time, it was important to all of us to keep that consistent as it's been all year. And I think you'll see when the principals talk about their schedules that there is a window of arrival that should allow some leeway for families dropping off first to elementary and then to the Galvin. And then in the afternoon, again, we prioritized dismissing elementary first, keeping in mind that we needed to build schedules based on what Doug was just referencing, student learning time, which is 5 hours at the elementary and then 5.5 hours at secondary. And that time does not count in transitions. And we also needed extended time for lunch and teacher planning time. So there's a lot that we needed to play around with and try to keep consistent. We're also dealing with the logistics of transportation that we've had in play all year. So we're hopeful that families can reach out to their principals if they're experiencing a hardship. But again, we prioritize dismissing elementary first with the hope that there'll then be time to make their way, parents to make their way to Galvin for a dismissal. And if there's a little lag time, we'll try to work with families around that. I just wanted to stress again that Doug has said this a lot, these aren't the schedules we left pre-COVID, and we will continue to assess schedules looking into next year as well, to keep in mind that hardship. Cleaning protocols, we've been touching base with Bob Schiroli. He's been working with building administrators as well. And just again, the goal here is to keep things consistent, to continue the protocols that he and the custodial staff have had in play all year. We'll also be keeping our private cleaning company as well. And I know that principals have been working with food services too on lunch process and cleaning in between lunches. And then for our remote program, we just want to, again, just reiterate, we've talked to a lot of families through the process, and our full remote program at our elementary level, well, our programs at all levels will stay relatively consistent. At the elementary level, we have our 2 cohort model where we have a morning and an afternoon cohort to receive live instruction. We did hear the feedback as we were playing around with just staffing and how to make everything work, that it was really important to our remote families to keep remote specialists in play. And I know our principals and our specialist teams are working together to try to make that happen, as well as Tom Bankert. And so that will stay the same. The remote program at the middle school and the high school will also stay the same. So I think that there will be, for the families who choose to stay in our remote program for the rest of the year, there will be some nice consistency for those families. And for end of year, we're looking to have our remote kindergartners last day of school be on June 16th, along with the rest of the district kindergartners. And then all other remote students will end on June 18th, like the rest of the district as well. So I think that, anything else on the remote program? I don't want to leave.
I think that covers it.
Okay.
Tara, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So does the 6-foot to 3-foot transition, is that a deal breaker that allows us to have ultimately all the kids back in school together? Or is that still not enough?
Finding in the level work, looking at classrooms and spaces, but I think we have found that for the most part, the students who are choosing to come back, as well as the current students, that we're able to keep them cohorted in a similar manner and maximize all space within the buildings. So the 6 to 3 feet is allowing for that to happen. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Well, a second part of it, does it also allow us to ultimately have the remote kids come back into school as well? Is there still enough space?
Well, so I think that we'd have to, I think that we're in a position where we would accommodate, if we had remote families making the move to come back. We've been collecting data through the survey, and I think what we're finding, based on the feedback that we're getting, is the majority of our full remote families are choosing to stay in that model for the rest of the year, but we do have some students who are coming back. And the students who have indicated they're coming back, and I know principals are having these conversations, weekly with parents trying to just troubleshoot. We have a plan to accommodate them within our full in-person return. I think, if every single student who was full remote all year decided they were going to come back, I think that would be a conversation. But I think what's happening right now, based on the data that we have and the parent and family conversations we've had, we're in a good position to accommodate families who are making the change.
Great, thank you very much.
No problem. Oh, Colleen, do you have, before I move on?
Colleen?
Yep. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, Kara, on that, do we have a deadline for families and students to switch from remote to in-person? I know that we had one in the prior hybrid model, when we moved into sort of January, but do we have one at this point where we're asking families to choose to stay in the full remote model or move into the in-person model?
Yeah. So, I mean, I unless you want to speak to it, Doug. Okay. We had, for our survey that we put out, we had asked for all responses to be sent in by, I think it was last Wednesday. But just because we've really just been trying to stress that head count is really critical at this point in terms of structuring our classrooms and our furniture and what we're pulling out of storage, what we're keeping in. We also want the ability to transition our full remote students well and give time to possibly make a visit or touch base with a principal or teacher before they come back. So, but it's hard. I think in education, it's hard to say like hard stop. You have no choices beyond this point, especially this year. So I know that I've been fielding a lot of phone calls from parents, principals have, Doug has, and we've just been trying to talk through concerns with parents who are maybe not ready to make that commitment yet. So I think it's just going to be a matter of us just working with families as they go. Throughout the year, we've asked for reasonable transitions. At the secondary level, we've asked for, if you're going to make the move, could it be at the start of the trimester or the start of the quarter, just for ease for both students and just the whole class structure. And then at the elementary, we've been going off of more like a 2-week heads up, 2-week window, for families to help us just be prepared so that we're fully ready for the students on their first day.
I think I would add there, Colleen, too, if you get questions or if any of our committee members get questions in town about the survey or about remote or coming back, or, I think anyone that has had questions, any parents that have had questions, when they've reached out to their principals, we've always been able to figure something out, right? We've always been able to figure something out. So I would urge anyone that might be watching this evening that might have turned in their survey and they're worried about it. If you have a question, reach out to your principal. I'm quite sure that they can answer the majority of your questions. Kara and I would also be willing to help in any way we can as well.
I just had one other question in regards to the dismissal, the arrival and the dismissal time for families. The transition in and of itself is probably going to be very stressful with high anxiety. And, you don't want the kids to be stressing out on their way to school. And I know last night at town council, they talked about a lot of road closures and different detours and things like that may make it hard for parents to drive across town. I mean, I know you had mentioned there'd be like a window, but I mean, is there going to be sort of like an unwritten rule that maybe, you know, a late arrival would be waived so that everybody will feel comfortable until like we kind of work out, you know, the kinks, or, yeah, I'm just.
So the answer is yes. I mean, we know that we need to be flexible to get kids back,
Yeah.
right? We know that that's going to be a fundamental part of our return. I know all of the principals are thinking about how they might be able to support individual families, right? They've already started this work. And so I know that it's happening in elementary, I know it's happening in middle, and I know it's happening at the high school. So I feel like there's, and it's some parents that have been concerned about road closures and, you know, we control a lot. We don't control that, fortunately, knock wood, right? But I think when parents have had questions and they've reached out and said, you know, I don't know, or I have a conflict, I don't know if I can get to Woodville. They've called Matt and they've been able to kind of just work through it and, you know, say, okay, we'll keep an eye on your son or your daughter for a couple minutes until you arrive, and that's at the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, we want to be flexible. I also want to be clear that, you know, if in week 3 a student is late again, you know, it might be a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we want to obviously have high expectations, but we know we need to be flexible in the schedule change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and good to know, so that if we are asked in the community, we can just, you
Yeah.
know, ensure that parents can reach out to all our principals.
Yep.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we move to the next slide, so our administrative group has been working really closely together, just talking about every level and what our priorities are. So just the following bullets really drove, as we were looking to refine full in-person schedules at every level, these are the priorities that drove that work. And, you know, as we thought a lot about what is developmentally appropriate, what is good for our students. We needed to create schedules that met our student learning time requirements, which again, as I said, is 5 hours of instructional time at the elementary and 5.5 hours at secondary. And then consistency. I think we all know that consistency is good for our students. It creates safe learning environments, and we're just trying to be really mindful of just how anxiety provoking this year has been for a lot of kids, a lot of families, and minimize any stress that might go along with the many transitions. I mean, we went through our phases early on, and you know that's a lot of phases for one school year. and you know, I think our teachers and staff and administration and students, who I don't know if we talk about enough to credit them, have really just done an unbelievable job this year. So we really tried to be thoughtful in terms of easing the transition for all of them. And so, you know, I'd like to first introduce our principals who we have here tonight. We have our elementary principals. We have Tiffany Back, who's the principal of the Greenwood School. We have TJ Liberty, principal of Dolbear. We have Brian Schmidt, principal of Walton, and Matt Carter, principal of Woodville. And then we also have Adam Colantoni, principal of Galvin, and then Amy McLeod, principal of the high school. So we're going to move into an update by each level. We're going to have them go over just some logistical information and then areas that they'll continue to be refining up until the start date for the full in-person. We talked a little bit, we thought it made the most sense to open it up for questions after each level update. So if that works for the committee.
Sure.
All right, and we're going to start with elementary. So I'll pass it over to all of you.
All right, great. Well, I'm leading off, and I have to say I was really pleased during the budget discussion to hear all the focus on social emotional learning, because when we think about elementary and we think about what's good for our kids, social emotional learning is at the bedrock of everything we do. We know when we're welcoming kids back to school on April 5th, we're getting kids that have been in school all year long in smaller cohorts. We have kids that have been in full remote for a little while and have come back to join the cohorts. And then we have students that are coming back from full remote. So we're going to have this whole mix of students. And one of the big things we're going to need to do is build community at the classroom level, build it at the school level, and make sure we're creating this safe environment where kids, you know, feel safe and supported so that they're able to learn and really get to focus on those academics. And one of the things we did in the schedule to really kind of emphasize that is we built in dedicated time for morning meeting time and closing meeting time, times for the class to come together, to get to know each other, to check in, get a temperature check, how everybody's doing, and really talk about things so that when we get down to the business of academics, everybody feels like they're in an environment where they're going to be able to learn. So we are right on board with the social emotional learning conversation. Happy to hear it. And I think turning it over to Matt, I think, to talk about arrival and dismissal.
Yeah, so it's been covered a little bit, but I do want to emphasize just for families, I know that I've received quite a few questions regarding arrival and dismissal. So we are actively looking for ways to support families. Our goal is to get students safely into the building. We are right now looking at an 8:15 to 8:30 arrival window, and we will of course be flexible with that, especially in the first couple of weeks as we kind of get back into the routine and structure. We are also well aware of our dismissal being at 2:20 and the potential impact that has for families that have students at maybe Doyle or Galvin or maybe another school. So we are, again, going to work with families and make accommodations, if possible. So please continue to reach out to us. Please continue to ask questions and please continue to engage us. Again, we recognize the timing could create some hardships for families, but we're here to help. We're here to serve. I'll turn it over to TJ.
Thanks, Matt. I'm here to talk a little bit about the curriculum that our students will be learning when they return to full in-person. It'll be the same content areas that have been covered over the course of the year. They'll have math, reading, writing. We'll also be integrating science and social studies, and they will have a specialist class. Along with that, parents know that some of our students have been engaging in some supplement instructional programs, ST Math, Lexia, Raz Kids. Those will also be integrated during the school day, and we're fortunate to have those programs to enrich students' learning experience in our building. As we return to a full-time model, students are going to see a lot of consistency and a lot of familiarity when they come back into a longer day. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about lunch and mass breaks.
Great. Yeah, so lastly, I'll just share a little bit about lunch and mass breaks, which will be a part of the school day that'll look a little bit different this year. So each class and each grade level at the elementary level will have a scheduled lunch and mass break. Due to the distancing requirements, so when students are unmasked, they must be 6 feet apart. And we're not able to do that in the classrooms. I know many folks have probably heard about some students in other districts eating in classrooms, or currently with our 6 feet of spacing, being able to take our snack breaks in our classrooms. But with our full classrooms, we're not able to do that. So we will have 5 different lunch periods at each school. Each grade level will have their own lunch, and we will spread students out, spaced 6 feet apart in the gym and in the larger, in the cafeteria, and in the larger schools, they'll also have students eating lunch in gyms, so that we can accommodate the full class. When, as I said, when students are unmasked, they'll be seated and 6 feet apart. We'll have time between each lunch block for the cleaning of surfaces, so that all of the tables can get quickly cleaned before turning over to the next group. And lastly, when weather allows, we'll make every effort to take our mass breaks outside and let students get some fresh air and add some additional distance. So that's what lunch and mask and snack breaks will look like when we get started on April 5th. And I believe now we can take any questions about the transition at the elementary level.
If there's any questions.
I've got one. Brian, on the lunch situation, I know in some of our neighboring communities, their plan was to have kids eat in the hallways. Is that not going to be necessary in Wakefield at all? Do we have a plan to be able to have all of the kids, like you said, either in a gym or in the cafeteria and not need to do that?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, we can fit all of our students with 5 lunch blocks at each school in our cafeteria / gymnasium at the smaller schools, and at Dolbear and Woodville, they should be able to accommodate all students in the gym and in the cafeterias.
And you said that's by grade level, because the other thing I've heard other communities doing is splitting half the class and half the class doing recess and half the class doing lunch. So we're also not going to need to do that. You're literally putting the whole entire grade being served the meal or having lunch at the same time.
Yes. Yep, that's right.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Yes, just a question, only because you have the microphone, Brian, I'll ask you the question, but it applies to everybody. Sure. As far as the kids buying lunches, are there going to have to be some accommodations there as well?
Yeah, so as we get started, we're going to continue. Students can still buy lunches, and we'll continue to offer lunches in the same grab and go format that students have bought lunches so far this year. So a prepackaged lunch that they can, quickly grab in the line, and we don't have to worry about additional handling of food or anything like that. But that's how we plan to get started on April 5th, to kind of keep things as simple as possible. But yes, all students may buy a lunch, although I believe it'll continue to be free, if I'm not mistaken. So all students are entitled to receive a free lunch in the cafeterias.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, Greg.
Thanks, Amy. This is a question for TJ. I think you mentioned it in passing, but art and music opportunities for the elementary school students once they come back. Could you talk about those?
Sure, Greg. We're really trying to work hard in integrating our specialists in our schedule, both at the remote and in the in-person model. The principals are working in collaboration with our teachers, with our colleagues. Tom Bankert and Brendan Kent is our visual performing arts and director of athletics and health and wellness at the K-12 levels, to really look at how we can provide opportunities for students to still have access to those curricular areas, while also knowing that we need to build in the 4 area high level content areas of math, reading, writing, social studies, science, as well as other areas of SEL, phonics, and a lot of other areas as well. So it is our goal to always provide students with a rich, well-rounded education. And we're looking and trying to build in ways to make that happen with a full person return.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know how hard this is to fit all these pieces, but I know my colleagues share my belief that art and music are particularly powerful learning tools that are both academically advantageous, but also support the social and emotional needs of students that we've been talking about tonight. So just want to advocate for those. Thank you, TJ.
Thank you. And Greg, I want to thank you to the school committee and to Doug, Kara, Christine, Len for supporting. I think the community's been tremendous in supporting the arts, specifically over many years of my time in Wakefield. And we value that as well. And of course, we're all working hard, and we're very fortunate to have wonderful teachers, specialists, gen ed across the board to provide that instruction for our students.
I have one other question, and I'll ask you again, Brian. So you can tell lunch was my favorite subject in elementary school, because of course it's on lunch again. So the question is, I imagine it's a bit of mass confusion now with the kids, with the whole lunch protocol and how that works. Are the teachers who, while someone's helping kids buy lunch, who's watching the rest of them? How are you coordinating that? I'm just sort of curious. It seems like that would be a minor nightmare.
Yeah, so it's it hasn't been too bad in the hybrid model, Mike, because what I can speak to what happens at Walton anyway. Essentially, at the end of the first cohort, students who are receiving a lunch are instructed by their teacher to head down to the cafeteria, and we have staff ready there who help them get a lunch and then help them make it back to their classroom. And it's really pretty easy. And then in the afternoon, basically as students arrive, the same thing happens. They report to their class, and then if they're receiving a lunch, can go to the cafeteria where we have staff who help them, quickly sanitize, get their lunch, and go back out the cafeteria door. I will admit, I think we're all curious to see what this will look like when we have the whole group there in the school. Certainly more things to figure out. But I'm confident that we can do it. And especially with one grade level at a time, for me at Walton, we're talking about 50 kids. I think give us a week or two and we'll find a system that works well.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The year, I think we've all seen our students adapt just so well to the routines, and I think it's a little bit of a different story that this is April after they've had the whole school year following a lot of different protocols. So if that's it for elementary principals, we can move on to the Galvin update. Adam, if you want to jump in.
All right, good evening, everyone. I like how the elementary group had the new principal go last with the lunch. That was well played, everybody. I wanted to go back to something Greg mentioned about the social work piece. Just something to create a little awareness is our student support staff works really closely with Elliott Community Services. They do a lot of wraparound services at all our levels. So although we can never have enough counselors, and the social worker piece is really an interesting direction, we do get a lot of support in the community with Elliott Community Services, and they work really closely with our student support staff. So I just wanted to add that piece while I had the opportunity. All right, at the middle school, similar to the other levels, we're just really deep in our planning. Our schedule is a little bit different. We've been running lunches all year long with students. So that piece we have worked out. I'd invite any of you over this week to see what lunches look like at the Galvin. It's really kind of a well-oiled machine right now. The students all either eat in the caf or the gym at 6 feet apart. We'll be adding a fifth lunch as well to allow for more time. But before I get ahead of myself, the priorities we're looking at, really just overall safety for students and staff, maintaining the protocols have been working well all year. We don't want to mix things up for kids too much. They're in really good routines right now. But if there are ways to adjust some of the things that we're doing, we're certainly open to that once we get all the students into the school and we see how things are going. I think one of our goals right now is to keep things as seamless as possible for students. Our biggest commitment is just keeping students with their current teachers and not moving teams or anything like that. We're going to keep the same specialist rotations that they've had all year to allow that continuity. And right now, we're really just trying to evaluate our space and use our space most efficiently. When we have all 4 grades in, it's roughly 1,000 students when we factor in how many students are remote. So on our hybrid days, currently we have about 500 students in the school. Once everybody is in the school and they're in their team and cohort location, you wouldn't know there's that many students in the school just based on the protocols we have. And quite honestly, the kids are doing an amazing job led by the teachers. We've had, for what I consider, a really successful year at the Galvin, given the context of what we're trying to navigate. I think the logistics will probably be the most challenging thing for us. The morning drop off will double the amount of vehicles that enter and leave Galvin. Morning staging areas for students where they enter and exit the building. I mentioned the lunches. I want to go back to something that Amy mentioned. We're certainly going to be really flexible with homeroom in the morning. Right now, our homeroom is currently 8:25 to 8:45. And we did that on purpose to allow for traffic to get to the school across town. And what we found is by 8:30-ish, the campus is really quiet. I do realize that by all families coming back, that might change a little bit. But we're going to leave our homeroom window open in the beginning till 8:40. If we need to go a little bit later, we will. But we're certainly not going to be coming down hard on any students that are coming in late the first few weeks. We just want students to get where they need to be safely, feel comfortable in the building, and work with families around any challenges that they have. Our school day is going to look really similar to what it does now in our hybrid model, the 8:25 to 2:30. footprint of the day. We don't anticipate anything too dramatically different for students, what they're experiencing right now. We do want to play around with the length of periods and how many classes they'll have. But we didn't want to create anything that they're going to have to really adjust to dramatically over the last several weeks. Lunches will stay the same as far as the length. And then we're going to maintain our in-person team time. And that's an important piece for us, for our special education services, our counseling supports, and really any flexible learning opportunities during that team time. And so really just next steps are just continuing to look at space. We actually want to get some feedback from our students this week, kind of more formally, just kind of hear what's on their mind about coming back, what concerns they have. We're going to put out a student Google form to hear kind of what their concerns and questions are. And then just really thinking through all of our blind spots when we welcome back everybody. Well, that's our plan to Galvin. We got a great team of staff and administrators that are working together on this, and we feel really confident about it. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Colleen?
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Adam, for the update. I just had a question, and there might be a big no on this, but just hearing from my Galvin student, I was wondering if there's a proposed increase in the allowed movement that they have within their cohorts, so that they can sort of, with the 3-foot CDC guideline, will there be an ability for them to sort of get up from their space? I'm not pretending that I know exactly what goes on right now, but just a little bit more movement. It seems that you're going to keep the teams together in their spaces, that they won't be switching. But what about a little bit more movement within their classrooms?
Yeah, that's certainly our goal. So currently students do have opportunities to move the building. If they have, depending on their specialist rotation, the PE teacher will take them outside. They certainly travel to go to the lunch spaces. They go outside for mass breaks. Our STEM labs are open if they had STEM. So they don't spend their entire day in the same classroom. And even in that sense, our teachers have been great about having students work in the hallways. If you come into our building, that the hallways are all kind of marked with 6-foot increments in the hallways with stickers, so students can go up there and work and do group work. So they certainly have a home base where they start the day, but within that, there's a lot of opportunities for us to have them move, not as much as they do in a typical year. I think right now it's hard to commit to what's going to be possible with all 4 grades in there. We are going to be tight with space, just given the cohort model we're using right now. We have to spread 2 more grades out across the building when everyone comes in. So we are going to be a little tight for space. So right now we're really trying to evaluate what space will be open for students to be able to go to. And then we have a beautiful campus. So I really want to encourage teachers to get outside for instruction as the weather gets nicer. We have some really great space behind the 5th grade wing. All around the campus, we'd like to see outdoor instruction happen as much as possible. So I think that's the best I could probably respond right now around that, Colleen.
Yeah. Thank you,
Adam. Adam, I just had a question in regards to the increased population, obviously, when we do go back full time. Now, if with the smaller cohorts, if you have students who may need, additional social emotional, support, would they normally leave the class if they need to go down to the student support services department? And if that is what they're doing currently now, it's only half of the student body. And I'm just wondering if with the entire student body in the school, is there enough staff for possible support if kids need it? Just keeping in mind with the social emotional, piece for the kids.
Correct. So yeah, I think that's another one where, so our student support team, just going back to September, they along with ourselves are committed to teaching coincidentally a social emotional class to students around eye care and kind of managing the stress and complexities of the pandemic. So our student support staff is more tied up than usual because they are teaching classes. We do have a full-time intern that's working with us as well. We have unscheduled the student support team currently to be available throughout the week. And our hybrid schedule, they have 1 day out of the 2 that they're free to see students across the school as needed. And then on the remote days, they do a lot of remote check-ins. So I think it's something we're going to have to closely monitor when we come back full time, around what type of counseling check-in we're going to need and how we might need to get creative and reschedule some of our counselors. But I know that's on their mind as well. So it's something we're going to have to just really closely monitor. But as it stands, in a typical week right now, we do have space and support, and students do have access to leave their classroom space to go check in with the counselor.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Adam?
Okay, so. All right, so we can move on to the high school. Amy McLeod. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. Happy to give you an overview of what's going to happen at the high school as we transition back to full in-person learning. So I won't be repetitive for a lot of the things that were said at the other levels ring true at the high school as well in terms of what was driving this change and what our priorities were. But I think the one piece that we had in mind most was transitioning students back into two spaces, right? Transitioning them back to a full day schedule, which our schedule with the PM learning blocks had flexible learning in the afternoons as versus scheduled classes. So that was our first priority. And then thinking about increasing contact time between teachers and students. That was something that we heard both from teachers and from families that was important at this time. So rather than wait for the state to announce a date, we are ready and prepared for a two-step plan at the high school level. So the first step of the plan is going to begin April 5th. That would be at the start of term 4. And at that time, we're going to move to a full day hybrid schedule. Parents, as Logan said earlier in the call, he was like my early PR guy on the call. Students and families at the high school have information about this step already. We're going to be moving to a daily schedule that has six 55-minute blocks to get us to the 5.5 hours of learning time. We're going to have a daily morning homeroom, as well as a mid-morning, it's a later morning 15-minute advisory. And in listening to Tiffany talk about what's happening with morning check-in and morning meeting at the elementary school, I'm glad to see that that's cycling sort of through the middle school to advisory and to high school, right? It's really important that kids have this time to connect with an adult in the building. So that's built into our schedule as well. The schedule is going to have 3 lunches. And so at the 6-foot mark, when we're in this full day hybrid, we will be able to keep kids at 6 feet in the cafeteria and feed students in 3 shifts. So we figured out through a lot of creative flex, looking at the space, talking to the cafeteria folks, working with Bob Shiroli, figuring out how we can do that in the cafeteria. We're also going to eliminate the remote Wednesdays, and go to an every other day rotation for the month of April. So students will be in one day, cohorts will be in one day and then out the next day. And that will rotate every other day throughout the month. So that's step 1. The second step of our return plan is going to come, so we'll be in that hybrid, that full day hybrid for the month of April. And then starting on May 3rd, we're going to follow the same footprint. So we'll be in that same 7:30 to 2:05 schedule, the same 6 block 55-minute block rotation. But we're going to combine our cohorts, and students will be back in person every day. The nice part about this is that students will be used to the bell schedule. They'll be used to the rotation of their classes. They'll be used to navigating the hallways because we'll still have the one-way hallways. They'll be used to navigating that in the cohorts. And then when we move to full in-person, it will be the same. That's a significant step for high school students, right? Our students move, they have 6 classes, they go to 6 different places in the building. And so that complicates things for high school students. So the idea of having this step process so that kids can transition to that adults can prepare students for that so that they're comfortable with those transitions. And that also that we have time to plan and practice for that. We were talking about things like 9th grade students needing support and helping to get from classes to the cafeteria and how do they work the cafeteria line. That we haven't done that formally this year as a whole group. It's been grab and go. So some of those pieces, the training, the getting used to the schedule, the talking about that we'll be working on. We are still working on the logistics for lunches when we get to the full in person. we've been playing with numbers and counting spaces. We know that we'll probably have to use the cafeteria. We'll have to use part of the field house. We're thinking we can do that. I mean, we're looking at a few other areas and ideas so that by the time we get to May 3rd, we're ready to accommodate all of our students in the 3 lunches. And we'll also continue with the safety protocols. We may have to modify them a bit when we get to that point. But again, when the students are eating, we will have them at 6 feet. The classrooms, we need to move in furniture, move things a little closer together than they are now because they are at 6 feet in classrooms. But we'll still continue not to use lockers. We'll still keep the one-way hallways going. And all the other protocols, masks and sanitizer and everything, we'll still keep practicing and doing with our students every day. I think that's really about it. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the administrative team who's really been instrumental in pulling this all together. And then also Will and the teachers. We've had a few meetings at the high school to try to talk through these changes. Change is not easy for anyone, but everybody's been really flexible and adaptable. And I think we're ready to take these these 2 next steps at the high school. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Greg?
Thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Amy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Amy, thank you. My question was whether you're making any special, I imagine you are making special plans and provisions for the seniors, given that, this is really going to be their last month and a half in school. And traditionally, of course, we have, they have all these milestones and special events and so many, rituals that, mark a normal year. And you have to balance those against trying to help them recover learning loss and do all the planning. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think I'll talk to the planning in a minute. I do think the nice part of getting back into the building at the beginning of May is that seniors will have at least a few weeks of what will feel like the new normal back in the building. So we're excited about that. Seniors' last day is the 28th, I believe. So that'll give a few weeks for them to have that. So this year, senior class officers, the senior class advisor, and the administrative team, and the senior night committee, we've been kind of meeting on a regular basis to talk about planning and events for the spring. We're excited. We're ready to send out another update to senior parents tomorrow, so that's coming. Working on thinking about a car parade. There's going to be lawn signs. We're doing the Honor Senior banner downtown again. Some guidance came out recently about graduation. So we're looking hopeful about what we'll be able to plan for graduation and outdoor graduation this year. It should be able to be great. And there's a few other really creative ideas that these seniors have for a potential barbecue games outdoor event with the help of senior night committee. And the senior officers are really trying to be creative around is a prom possible and what would that look like? And so they're working really hard with us to try to figure out some possibilities. So yeah, I mean, I think we're not caught off guard this year, right? We've had time to think about it, and we've been meeting regularly. And so I know it's going to be a great ending to the year for these students, even though it's been a difficult year. So
yeah, thank you. And yeah, the town really did rally last year with all those special provisions, and I think we certainly want to do that this year. And of course, if the school committee can support anything new, please come back to us, work with Doug and Kara if we can help in that regard as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen.
And thank you, Amy. Amy, I had a question. You kind of just spoke to it. So my question changed a little bit, but recognizing the last day of seniors being 5/28, and we have about 260 students in our senior class, was there great consideration given to the idea that, or the plan to go into our second phase on May 3rd, specifically regarding seniors being given the opportunity to be in a full person schedule every day. Because you could also see on the other side of that, that is 260 students less on 5/28 who have to manage safety protocol around. So was consideration given to this seniors specifically with the 5/3 the second phase in that.
Yeah. So I think I'll speak for every principal on the call and say that we've given consideration to every iteration of every schedule that you can ever possibly think of. I have more versions of schedule in my Google Drive than you type schedule and there's like 200 documents. So, I mean, yes. And I think, Colleen, the big thing that it came down to is, first of all, we're racing against a clock. I kind of feel like I feel like there is going to be guidance from the state that's going to come out that's going to put kids back in school anyway as high school students at some point. I actually think it's important for these seniors to be back in school. And we went back and forth. Logistically, it would be much easier for us to say, you know what, the seniors aren't going to come back in. We'll do a later date. It'll be easier on the school. We talked about that and what it looked like. But I do think we can manage it. I think that we're going to have to be a little more creative. I think we can maybe talk about some areas that maybe seniors have their own area where they can eat so that they can actually have some time as a class. So we have some good ideas on the table. But I think it's important that they come back, that they get to see their teachers and all of their classmates, and they get to experience at least the last few weeks of high school, again, in a new normal, but together. So, you know, I certainly could go on and on about all the iterations and why we did, but I think we landed in a good spot. And I know that we had parents reaching out who were kind of on both sides of this issue. Some are saying, like, I really just wish you had let them stay out. And then some are saying, you know, you got to get them back as soon as you can because we want our seniors in. So I know that the plan isn't going to please everyone, but I think that it's going to be good for our students. And I think that's been a through line for us. Tiffany Back said that earlier today, right? What's best for kids. And I think really them being back together is best at this point.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
So first of all, I just want to say that Amy was probably the only one that was happy to see fire engines pull up behind the high school tonight rather than her house.
I knew you couldn't let that go. I knew you
never
let it go.
I'll never let that go as long as I know you, Amy. Never, ever. That's like burned in my mind now. I can't.
I was waiting for it.
I can see fire engines. But I want to reiterate what Amy said. The senior night committee is working with them, and I know this is challenging. But we certainly have much more time this year than we did last year to do these things, and we've done many of these things before. I think we pretty much have a locked-in sponsor for the banners, so that's all good to go. We just found out tonight about that, and we're planning on doing many of the other things that we did last year. And I know there's some things that are still in flux because of spacing requirements and outside. But yeah, I think everybody, and including all of the senior parents, as you might imagine, are very anxious to make this special as we can. We have to try to avoid falling all over each other coming up with the program. So thanks for all that work, Amy.
Welcome.
Any other questions for Amy?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to all of our principals for coming tonight. We really, really appreciate it. I think we're ready to move on.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Well done. They're such a good group.
I know.
So I think we're ready to move on to summarizing the surveys.
Oh, is that, do I just keep going?
No, you're good. I think Ian just needs to switch.
Okay.
So next on the agenda is just the us giving a summarizing kind of the information that we collected on the logo survey. And so before we get started, I just like to kind of back up a little bit before I jump into slides and just talk a little bit about kind of where we are in this process. So in our panel last week, we invited tribal leaders and tribal representatives from around the state to come to Wakefield to kind of talk with us about and to advise us and around what, from their perspective, what does it mean in regard to schools that are using Native American mascots. And the evening did not get off to the best start. I think what we missed an opportunity to kind of do an introduction to the video that we shared, right? The video was a kind of a summary of where we are in Wakefield in this process, right? And so it started off with a land acknowledgement. It gave a history in regard to the connections to the Native Americans here in Wakefield. It then talked about kind of the arc of where did our logo come from, the origins, and how it was developed. There were two pieces at the end that I think that were really important. One was a curriculum connection in regard to how we're making connections in our curriculum and where it looks like in our standards in regard to telling about the histories and teaching about the histories of Indigenous people. And then the last slide was really to try to focus on the work and connect to the work that is happening at the state. And so, we got through the panel. It didn't go as smoothly as I think anyone would have liked. We have reached out to the panelists and have connected. And so I think that we're better for having been able to participate in the opportunity. And I want to thank the Policy and Communication Subcommittee for working so hard to get that panel to come to Wakefield. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the summarizing of the survey. We jumped ahead too. All right. So there's just a little delay in our with the clicker here. So this is not a PowerPoint presentation. This presentation is done on Canvas. So the slides that I'm going to share tonight are broken down to two parts, right? Structurally, they're the same, right? The first part, we will review the community survey, and the second part, we will review the student survey, okay? The community survey and the student survey were both conducted using Google Form. The community survey was available in the daily item, and through the link that was provided online, you could have also printed out the survey and dropped off a paper copy. We got 17 surveys back that were printed in the newspaper, and you can see in that picture, that's actually a page in the item that was used that relate to the questions that were asked. And so the total number of community members that participated in the survey, we had 1,474 participants in the survey. I also want to mention that in addition to the survey that was taken, we've gotten 38 email that basically was directed to the Policy and Communication Subcommittee that voiced thoughts and concerns about the Native American logo. And there were 28 emails that we received were voiced kind of some concerns about our use of the Native American logo and imagery, and voiced some concerns and desire to make a change. And 8 of those responses really asked us to kind of just keep what we have. But this is a distribution of the participants that participated in the community survey. So the surveys were broken down to 4 parts, okay? The first part asked, what was your connection to Wakefield? And then there were 3 parts that followed, okay? And so this was part of the first question. Asked participants, how would you best describe your current Wakefield community connection? And participants were allowed to, or asked to, they could more than welcome to choose more than one if they so wished, right? And so the first question that was asked in the survey was a choice question. And it read, which of the following words do you associate with the name Wakefield Warrior? Select up to 3. And there was there was a category at the bottom that said other, and people filled in other words. And so, in some of the other words that were filled in are highlighted on the left of the slide that are bulleted there. But it gives a distribution in the bar graph of the words that were highlighted most. Okay? And so, and again, personnel or people that participated in the community survey could choose up to 3 of these words that kind of reminded them, or what did they associate with the Wakefield Warrior logo. And so you'll see here that the prevailing words, or the most common words selected, were brave, honor, and strength, right? And so there's considerable favorable association with both the name and the logo, but there's also other words that are associated with it as well. Words that I'll read down the list: racist, offensive, cultural appropriation, fighting, courage, embarrassing, pride. So there's kind of a mix of feedback that we got in regard to word association. The next parts of the survey, and again, the surveys are the same, but the next parts of the survey showed 2 images, and they were the kind of the front-facing image that we currently have as our logo, and the kind of the side-facing image of the Native American. And so, and the question was, when you see the logos below, and there were 2 depicted, what does this kind of, what are your thoughts and feelings? And people were asked to choose up to 3 of this list, 3 items on this list, okay? And what we did was, in the survey, it comes out kind of as a block of 3 choices. If people made 3 choices, you don't have to make 3, but it came out as a block of 3. So what we did was we disaggregated all of the choices, and then sum totaled those choices and the number of individuals who selected these statements individually. And I think that this is important, and I think it's revealing, excuse me, because what you see here is a distribution where what's highlighted is that the logo is a significant part of the history of Wakefield, and the logo is a long-standing tradition, right? 2 undeniable kind of, in regard to the number of choices that people selected that, it's kind of like 1 and 1 or 1 and 2. But another choice that was made that I think is revealing and undeniable, right? And I think is going to prompt some of our conversation tonight, is that the third choice that's really equal in number selected in the community survey was this idea that the logo is offensive to Native American groups. You know, and we learned in the panel that, you know, I think when you're in Wakefield and it's part of what we do, I don't know if you always know the perspective of others. But one of the common things that we heard from the panel was, you know, we had comments like, I didn't know how much it offended, but now I do know. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So this was the third part of the survey. And the fourth part of the survey allowed people to kind of add a comment, right? And so, and what we did was we went through all of the comments in the community surveys, and we highlighted a few themes, and we just highlighted a few items. So please, there were many statements that were recorded that kind of fell into these themes, and we selected a few, okay? One of the themes that was highlighted really significantly was this idea of changing the logo, but keeping the warrior name. And you can see from the text that has been selected. For example, Wakefield can still be the quote warriors without having a Native American mascot. And so I would recommend keeping the Wakefield Warrior name. And so this is a theme that was highlighted throughout the 1,500 or 1,474 comments that were made that I think are important and will hopefully guide us moving forward. Another theme was changing opinions and stances on the tribal panel. So I made comment to this a moment ago. You know, we heard and we read pretty consistently, you know, that I was originally leaning toward wanting to keep the logo given the Wakefield history toward it. Okay? But I have to say, after hearing from tribal leaders, it no longer makes sense to keep it. Okay? And that theme came through the text loud and clear. Another theme, tribal voices post-panel considerations. And so, you know, we heard that in addition to comments like, I didn't know, but now I know, you know, we heard comments like this. The Forum of Indigenous People was fantastic. Thanks for organizing it. I was leaning away from keeping the logo, but after the information presented, I now can't understand at all why anyone would advocate for keeping it. Thanks. Again, just one perspective, and I think we'll present more information on balance here as well. The desire, there was a very prevalent theme, and I know that there was a kind of a rich conversation that was happening on social media as well. There's this desire to return to the side-facing logo instead of the front-facing logo. I think people thought that it was more historically connected to the school, and I think there was a lot of talk and a lot of comments that made this connection, right? One of the comments, I would like to keep the warrior, but I think it should be changed back to the original side-facing one. The new one, I don't feel pays tribute to our ancestors. The old one, honors them in an elegant way, right? That is a very common theme that we heard. Common points and ongoing discussion, right? Native American, the Native American residents in the panel spoke on behalf of the topic. We should listen to them, right? There's this idea of showing deference and kind of just listening to kind of the guidance that we've gotten, and we should take their lead. It's also happening at the state level, so it's not something that is uncommon. School merchandising and discomfort. You know, so we've gotten a few email, you know, that have reported from students and from parents that have said, you know, my children are just really uncomfortable wearing the front-facing logo. They feel like it's aggressive. They feel like it doesn't portray Native Americans in an appropriate light. And so because of those reasons, we're just really uncomfortable. And it's on school merchandise, and they feel like it's everywhere. So that's a common refrain that we've heard. We've also gotten email around from student athletes that have said, you know, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm uncomfortable with this image being on my gear. So we've gotten opinions, right? Our logo needs to change and we need to grow as a community. These don't fall into categories of themes, but more opinions, right? And so I think that this has been highlighted. This topic has been really divisive in the community. And I think it has been very difficult. It has strained relationships. And I think it's been a hard thing to be able to discuss. And in the emotion, I don't know if we're getting to some of the deeper questions that we might need to be revisiting or might need to be considering as we move forward. Again, I won't go into all these, but these are just more opinions about our logo needs to change and we need to grow as a community. But there are also an equal number of opinions. I want to be clear about this. Please hear my words. I want to be crystal clear in my communication. There are an equal number of opinions, right, that state our logo should stay because it honors traditions and identity, right? And so Dick Beard and the Beard family and the Beard name was kind of woven throughout the text. So I think the connection to the Baird family is something that we're going to need to continue to talk about and really think about how we are honoring not only Indigenous people, but very specifically the Baird family and Dick Baird in particular. So in regard to the student survey, this section of the slideshow is set up exactly like the first half. Students in grades 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 participated in the survey. Total number of participants, 862. Same questions were asked. You'll see a same distribution. If you look at this distribution and look, if you recall the distribution that we saw in the community survey, brave, honor, and strength were the 3 highest chosen words that were associated with the logo, both in the student survey and in the community survey. However, it's important to note that other words that reference discrimination, cultural appropriation, education, conflict, were also highlighted as other words that students could fill in. And so this is a distribution that students chose. It's very similar to, and if you look at this idea of the logo as longstanding tradition, right? The logo is a significant part of the Wakefield history. These are undeniable, right? And interesting, highlighted on the student surveys was this idea that the logo was an important part of the pride of Wakefield alumni. So students are keenly aware of the conversations that our adults are having. They're keenly aware. We often think that they're not as tuned in as we would hope or we would like, but they are very much so, right? But I also want to highlight the range, right? And not only what's highlighted most frequently, but there are other parts here that are undeniable, right? The logo is offensive to Native American groups. The logo represents cultural appropriation. These are also themes that, when you look at them on balance, you can't ignore the fact that it's a longstanding tradition, just like you can't ignore the fact that this is a cultural appropriation, right? So the WPS student commentary followed the exact same themes that the community commentary followed, okay? And so we didn't break it out in the same because there was such a parallel, but we did highlight a few of the student comments that we'd just like to share. One of the comments, many Indigenous people have said that they find mascots based off of them to be offensive and want them to be changed. So should we listen to them, right? That's a student looking, I think, for an answer, right? Should we listen? And so after watching the Zoom meeting, my opinions have thankfully changed after educating myself. One of the panelists mentioned how mascot is a symbol, like an animal, mythical creature, and not a living person, or not something that's living. Native Americans are still living, and we implant from a young age the wrong idea of what they are in today's society. These are things that students are struggling with, that they're trying to make meaning of. That, to be honest with you, I think that they're looking to us for help and guidance on this. And I think we have an opportunity to help them with this. Student comment, my honest opinion is I don't have an issue with the logo. But if Native American tribes / groups have reached out to the school about the warrior being offensive, then it should be changed. For them, it's a little bit more cut and dry. They don't have the perspective. And so that's just a quick summary of the surveys. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the surveys, right? And there's been some questions about, are they a genuine way for us to understand what people are thinking and what they're talking about. I think based on the data, it absolutely is, I think, a very revealing snapshot. It shines a light on all of the conversations that are taking place, not only in the community, but also in our schools and with students of all ages. So I think this captures very well, I think, what is happening, and I hope that you can see the range and the conflict at play here. I don't know if conflict is the right word, maybe tension between these two ideas. One, that it's a long-standing tradition for us to have this mascot, and people love it, okay? But there's another part where people are struggling with, this is happening at the state. Is it the best representation of Indigenous people? And that's probably the deepest question that I think we're really not getting to, is in 2021, is the mascot that we currently use the best way to represent Indigenous people, right? I don't know if we're getting to that space. It's more like we're for it or we're against it, without really trying to seek to understand and listen. There's been a lot of emotion around this. And I hope that the survey information that we shared tonight honors kind of both sides and the difficulty that people have had and continue to have with the notion of the possibility of change. And so I don't know if people have questions. I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have. Michael?
So I thought it was interesting, and Doug and I talked a little bit this afternoon, and I was kind of trying to machinate through all the data, and it was a lot, and there were a lot of different questions. So there was certainly some areas, if someone said, I love the logo, obviously, they want to keep the logo. But if they said it was, I forget the exact terms, there was clearly, I hate it, get rid of it, I love it, keep it. And then there was a lot of this in the middle because, there were many questions. What really struck me the most about it, particularly on the student side, that almost 25% of the students were indifferent completely. And my percentages could be off by a little bit, but in that general range, the community, there was very little indifference. And now I only did a sample. I probably got about half the way through it, Doug. I just ran out of time. But there was a small percentage of the community that was indifferent based on the criteria I established, which is perhaps subjective. Like 7% of the community were indifferent. They really didn't care either way. But almost 25% of our students didn't care, or they just didn't really care. And I thought that was very telling. The survey, whatever everybody decides to do, they're going to decide to do as far as a vote. But I thought that was almost a call for education, to have no opinion at all. I almost felt like the kids just didn't know enough about the Indian culture to even have an opinion in that regard too. So, we've talked about the whole education thing. If anything good comes out of this at the end of the day, if we can have a more robust educational curriculum around the Indian heritage, we'll have done a good thing at the end of the day. And the survey just struck to me in that regard. I'm not sure how you felt, Doug, about that.
Yeah. The concept of education came up when we had the public panel, right? Whether you were for or against, greater education was really highlighted, right? And so I agree. And this is, Michael, when I say the tension between different ideas, right? There's a definite tension between, it's not cut and dry, right? There are layers to this, but layers that I think need to be addressed, right? That's really, and I know that this is a very hard topic, but I think your point, Michael, is really well made. When we think about, this idea that all problems bear gifts, right? A gift, I think, for us is going to be this opportunity to refine our curriculum, make greater connections to Indigenous persons, and to also the history of Wakefield, right? I think that will definitely be an opportunity for us.
I'd just like to jump in there because I think neutrality and not caring are a little bit different. And I think that some of the ways that question the answer was worded. I don't know if, Doug, if you can go backwards.
I can,
But
or I think I can.
I think in some cases it was, I don't, it's like I don't feel one way or the other. I feel like is the way.
Yeah, they said, I don't have any strong feelings, Susie.
I don't
think
have any
that's
strong
the statement.
feelings.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And I do think that there are kids who are confused, right? And who are, and maybe really don't care about or are neutral on the decision. But I think neutral and not caring are are different. I think there are people who can understand that this is a complicated matter and don't really feel like they need to weigh in. But I just feel like saying that they don't care is a little bit strong.
I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a lack of understanding.
Okay.
Right? I do. And I think, so for example, when we talk with students about race, we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, students are so exceptional in this space. Students as young as kindergarten are exceptional in this space, right? They're able, their ideas are very strong, their questions are excellent, okay? They see kind of, things around fairness. They see things around equity in regard to different people need different things. It's just the way it is, right? And so, I think a lot of it has to do with how the question and the concept is framed, right? And I also think that sometimes these topics can scare students, so they pull back, right? And I think when, the conversations get heated, I think that they don't always know where to land. And so I think it's hard for, if it's hard for adults, it's hard for kids. That's kind of my working theory.
And I also think a big takeaway from this whole experience has certainly been that Wakefield Public needs to focus more on educating the students about our town's history, specifically, in regards to the Warrior and the Baird family and General Galvin and beyond, So, I mean, if there is one thing that I think we can all agree on, it's that we really need to implement, a better way to educate and inform. But again, I just feel as though the survey was, loaded with information in terms of the results. And again, we weren't, I didn't really have a lot of time to go through the spreadsheets. So is this doc actually going to be available to us to review? And because again, I know you shared different comments, right? But, I'm assuming you went through them to say, that they were it was equal for or against, or however you want to kind of interpret it. So I think that's a big takeaway too, at this point.
I just wanted to add one other thing to my comments. I don't think the education limits itself to kids in school. We all have to get better educated about this. Not just school committee parents, we all have to. I'm the first to admit I am woefully inadequate in my knowledge about the Native American history, what they went through, what they're dealing with now in that regard too. So I think, let's not just throw it on the kids' lap. It belongs to all of us ultimately.
Does anyone have their hand up? We can't see the full screen.
Greg does.
Oh, Greg,
Yeah.
sorry, Greg. Yeah, we can't see you guys
Yeah.
at the moment, so
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Mike. So I just want to remind my school committee colleagues, I'll have more to say about this later, but at the end of the panel last week, more than one of the Native American representatives who shared their time with us urged us not to do the survey. And their core argument was that, this is not a public polling exercise. This is primarily a civil rights issue. And I agree with them. And although we had committed to the survey as part of our process. So I did not advocate to stop the survey. I agree with their point of view that that as important as it is to understand everyone's perspective on this, the school committee's responsibility is not to make a decision based on percentages. It's not to make a decision based on a poll. It's to make a decision about what's best for students and how to protect and advance the civil rights of students, especially those students of Native American ancestry. And as important as the question is that Doug raised tonight, which is, how do we best represent Native Americans? In a way, that's a secondary question. This primary question for us tonight, if we debate this and vote on this, is how do we ensure that our Native American students and all students, especially those from disenfranchised groups, are not having their civil rights violated by the use of racist imagery. So I want to remind my colleagues that this is the core of the debate, and we have to keep coming back to that because that is what is most important here. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, Colleen.
Thank you, Amy. Doug, I didn't want to sort of start the speak on behalf of sort of my thoughts, unless, if you had more to say on this, I didn't want to sort of interrupt that, but I wasn't sure where we were going. So if you have more to add to the comments.
I'm not sure I heard your question, Colleen. You cut out?
She just wants to make sure you're done, I think. Yeah, she can ask questions.
I am done, certainly. If you, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what I got from that.
All right, I'm still working on my hotspot here. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can everyone? Okay, super. First, I wanted to thank Superintendent Lyons, Assistant Superintendent Caramaro, Central Office, the Wakefield Public Schools teacher leadership teams, and to my colleagues for their commitment to the work required to successfully meet the steps outlined in this process. I'd also like to thank the entire community of Wakefield, the parents, caregivers, students, and teachers of the Wakefield Public Schools for their patience, engagement, and energy around not only the specific issues surrounding the mascot and logo, but also the discussion and debates that stem from such crucial and emotional topic. These discussions have been difficult, upsetting, revealing, impassioned, informative, and necessary. I believe all involved had to take a step out of their comfort zone, as we've been required to often this past year. In doing this, we open our hearts and our minds to learn, listen, understand the perspectives and experience of others. While we need to acknowledge and learn from our missteps and our mistakes, I'm confident that this challenging process has required us to improve and move forward to continue to uphold the mission of the Wakefield Public Schools. Lastly, to our Native American tribal leaders and panelists who so courageously participated in our panel discussion, thank you. I am grateful to you for your grace, leadership, compassion, tolerance, guidance, education, and commitment to your history, your culture, and your future. I don't really have any further remarks right now, but I would like to ask if anyone, our committee members had anything more to say on the matter. I know that Tom had reached out to see if he could reached out to all of our members to provide the start of a resolution, and I didn't know if he might want to present that to the full committee and the public at this moment.
No, I actually don't have such a thing, Colleen. My goal, which I would support, hoping or assuming that a motion would be coming forward that we could speak to.
Okay. Sorry.
Colleen, could I ask a question of you?
Yep.
Do you want to do sort of everybody got to kind of says their thing and then put forward the motion, or do the motion and then we say our thing? Any preference on your side? Either way, we're fine.
I'm sorry for the confusion. I just wasn't sure. It doesn't really matter who reads the motion, but I think that if it's okay with the chair and you all, that I'll present the motion and then we can enter into discussion on the motion and then move forward from there. Amy, is that okay with you?
Yep, that would be best. Thank you.
Okay. And Tom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like call you out on that. I wasn't really. Okay. After months of community discussion, presentation of research, forums, surveys, and the receipt of many emails and letters, the Wakefield School Committee thanks all of our students, families, alumni, staff, and neighbors who have respectfully submitted their comments, concerns, and suggestions. After thoughtful reflection, I move that the Wakefield School Committee, in an attempt to honor generations of Native American people, culture, lore, and imagery, commission the Wakefield Public Schools to immediately retire the current high school logo and discontinue the production and/or distribution of imagery that includes references to Native Americans. Further, that the school committee, through the superintendent, high school principal, and athletic director, prohibit the production of any new gear, merchandise, or apparel bearing such Native American imagery by an organization, affiliate, organization group associated with the Wakefield Public Schools. Furthermore, the Wakefield Public Schools is authorized to retain the title Warriors for use in its athletic teams, student activities, and organizations, and related school communications, provided it is decoupled from any association with Native Americans, their culture, or history. This provision recognizes that historical reference to Wakefield Warriors predates associations with Native Americans. Next, the school committee charges the Policy and Communications Subcommittee to further review the community and school committee input on this matter, examine the impacts and expectations of taking this direction, and recommend a resolution of goals, broad actions, and benchmarks to be brought forward to the next school committee meeting for discussion and possible action. Finally, the Wakefield School Committee apologizes on behalf of the Wakefield Public Schools to its Native American students, to Indigenous people across Massachusetts and beyond for any harm that its use of Native American imagery has caused.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Mike.
So that was very well done. Thank you, Colleen. Whoops. Do you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, that my message. So the last part of your motion, just so I understand, so we'll have a meeting in 2 weeks where we'll talk about the specifics of what's going away, when, what's going to stay. Is that the intention? Just to make sure I have that clear.
Right. So there's many parts that we sort of wanted to recognize in the resolution, but we felt it was important tonight to sort of get to the sort of part A of this, the motion. And then because the Policy and Communication Subcommittee hasn't been able to meet since the panel discussion, I sort of put forth an aggressive meeting schedule for the next few Fridays to iron out and understand how we make this happen. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but there's multiple, as we've talked about, as Doug has talked about, as all of our members have talked about, there are multiple parts to this conversation and sort of how the rollout of the retirement of such imagery, but then also the focus on education and curriculum around, our Indigenous people in this area.
Great, that helps. Yeah, I didn't expect to have a project plan in place, but yeah, I get this is complicated, and tearing up turf fields and whatever else we need to do is complicated. So we need to be thoughtful about that financially.
We would like to do some more work around that in our subcommittee meeting, and then present that back to the full committee.
Yep. So I'll kind of give you my thoughts, and I think I'll take what Greg said and perhaps take it in a slightly different direction of sorts. I see this as almost a greater goal than the logo staying or going at the end of the day. And I struggle with what is the best way to achieve a purpose of, I don't know how to articulate this very well, of making a better life for American Indian. And getting rid of the logo might be one, educating ourselves and our children might be another, getting involved in other activities that might benefit the American Indians. You know, helping to set up a college fund, things like that American Indians need as well. Because I do struggle, and it's been a very educational process. It's been a very painful process, as we all know as well, in that regard. At the end of the day, I promise I will respect all of your opinions, no issue. So I struggle with what's the best way to do that? What are the best steps to do that? What's the best use of our time, financial resources, and things of that sort? And from my perspective, education is the most important way to make a meaningful difference. I question taking the logo away, is that going to make a meaningful difference? Or is educating ourselves and our children to understand the American Indian culture, things of that sort in that regard? And certainly providing a foundation for, and this hasn't even been established yet, of some group that might want to take this to the next level. You know, if we all agree that the American Indians are suffering in so many ways, emotionally, physically, in that regard, is there a logical step we can take to help in our small way to bridge that gap as well? So that's where I struggle, is where do we put our time? Where's the biggest bang for our buck to make the lives of American Indians better? You know, they are to some extent our culture, and it's important, and certainly we want to recognize that culture in some way. It might not necessarily be a logo, but in some other ways as well. So that's kind of where I have struggled through this whole thing, is what is the best way to improve the lives of American Indians in that regard. So that's really my comment. And I hope I truly hope, you know, that and we have tried to be the model of respecting each other's opinions, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. To some extent, it's the journey, not the destination. How you get there is as important as what you get to at the end of the day. And I hope that those in the community, even though they have varied opinions about this, as we all know, all too well, we've all gotten thousands of emails. I hope at the end of the day, they can realize it's okay to agree to disagree on an issue. Many times you get to a better solution that way. So I believe we tried to be that as a school committee. I hope we continue to be that way. I think we will. But I hope we as a community can kind of grasp that concept and move forward, because it's a wonderful community. And we shouldn't let things like this divide our community as much as it has. So I do hope we can get back to being that special community that we've all grown to love. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Mike was just saying, I did write down some notes here. You know, clearly there's so much tension on both sides surrounding this issue, and I think it's very important that the school committee be the leader in saying that while, you know, it's clear that not everyone in town is going to agree, but everyone in town certainly deserves to be treated with respect in regards to this issue. And, you know, in that respect should be given to everyone, regardless of how right they actually think their opinion is on either side. And at the end of the day, I just can't stress how important I feel it is for everyone to accept and respect all opinions, even if we don't agree. I mean, you know, that is to me what is really important here. And, you know, of course, we've all been through a lot during this process, which has been very difficult. You know, there have been so many different opinions on both sides. And again, at the end of the day, you know, I just want to ensure that, you know, we send a message that we may disagree, but we respect one another. And that is, you know, honestly what is the most important thing to me. And I really do, you know, obviously agree with you, Mike, in terms of the education piece, you know, and what could we do as a community to support the Native Americans, you know, and, you know, I really liked what Tom, Eagle Rising Libby mentioned about, like, you know, we might want to be careful, in other words, you know, because if we have this logo retired or removed, you know, it may not be around anymore, and people may, in years to come, just forget about them altogether. So I don't want that either. So it's super important to me to be mindful of all of those issues. Susie?
So typically I speak from the heart, but that always gets me in trouble. So I'm going to read my comments tonight. So tonight I support the motion to vote to remove the Native American imagery from the Wakefield logo, but to preserve the warrior name. Not long ago, I was on the fence about this issue. While I had received many emails, received emails from students, alum, and parents last summer asking us to consider making a change, I really didn't understand why. My feeling was that since the Baird family approved of the logo use, in fact felt it honored their history in Wakefield, then the logo must be okay. My opinion really only started to shift as I started to read more about the topic and as I heard from more and more people in town about how this issue made them feel. Last week's Native American panel, though, made it crystal clear to me that we needed to move forward with a plan to change the logo, and quickly. The panelists made many important points, but the one that stands out most for me was the person that noted that logos and mascots are usually animals, people that no longer exist today, like Spartans or Vikings, or mythological creatures. They are not living people in current times. Teams do not use Black or Latino or Asian people as their logos. We heard loud and clear that the vast majority, not all, the vast majority of local Native Americans do not want their culture to be represented by logos. What we also heard at the panel was that more education is needed about Native American culture, both past and present. This is how we can keep their history alive. This is how we can honor the Native American history of Wakefield. Education must be a priority at all levels as part of this decision. I do not believe that anybody on this committee is endorsing the ripping out or throwing away of anything that has a current logo on it. My hope is that the plan would be to thoughtfully replace items with the new logo when it makes sense, but with the intent to limit unnecessary expenses. The logo change would happen in a phased approach, not overnight. My hope is that we can find a way to memorialize the evolution of the warrior name and the logos that have represented it over the years. This would include the evolution of the logo, the involvement of the Baird family in its inception, the drawings by John Galvin. I'd also like to see us consider naming a part of the new high school after the Bairds. This would be an effort to remember and reflect on our past, not erase it. I will close with this. Since the panel, which was only 7 days ago, the school committee has received almost 20 emails, with the vast majority in favor of changing the logo. Since this discussion started last summer, we have received more than 60 emails, with about half of them asking for a change, a few commenting on our process, and the remainder requesting to keep the logo. The community has been split in the communications we have heard. I have read these emails very carefully. They have come from current students, alum, teachers, parents, and community members. I wanted to share excerpts from 2 of those letters that we received recently. I do have permission from both people that I'm reading from their emails. From the Galvin Middle School Student Support Team, the staff most closely in touch with our middle schoolers and their current social and emotional well-being. I'll quote the email. "We would like it to be on record that as the Galvin Middle School Student Support Team, we feel the use of another's culture as a mascot or logo is inappropriate, detrimental to student mental health, and counterproductive to the community core values we strive to teach as educators in Wakefield." And second, from a woman who was raised here in Wakefield, she was a graduate of Wakefield Memorial High, an athlete who wore the uniform with pride, but raising biracial young children in this community. She says, "My twins will be entering kindergarten in the fall, and my husband and I have decided that we will be sending them to the Mystic Valley Regional Charter School next year instead of Wakefield Public. This decision was solidified by the recent rhetoric and obvious display of racism that the discussion around the mascot has had in our community. I am pretty confident that other BIPOC community members feel the same. Bottom line is that this community needs diversity to thrive. If the mascot is kept, it is undoubtedly going to send a message to the members of the BIPOC community that they are not welcome in this town and their voices do not matter. The retirement of the logo the mascot is not simply a vote around the mascot issue, but also sends a loud and clear message that the leadership of Wakefield will not stand for racism or discrimination, and that the town is committed to creating a community that is welcome to people from all backgrounds. These two letters, along with the many others we have received over the past couple of months, are just some of the reasons why I plan to vote to remove the Native American imagery from the Wakefield logo. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Yes, Craig.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Susie, for your comments too. And thank you to Tom and Colleen for their excellent work on this in the subcommittee as well with Darcy. And I want to also thank all the Wakefield residents, educators, and students who have taken the time to share their perspectives on this complex emotional issue. School committee colleagues, what have we learned? We've learned from decades of research of the harmful effects of racist stereotypes on children. We've learned of repeated calls from every legitimate Native American organization to end the use of this harmful imagery. We've heard those calls echoed in passionate pleas from our Youth Council, our Human Rights Commission, our local anti-racism coalition, local faith leaders, and some of our best Wakefield public school educators. We've learned that our own state senator, who is also the Massachusetts legislature's leading voice on public education, echoes those calls and encourages us to eliminate this harmful imagery. So I ask my school committee colleagues, why would we ignore these voices? Why would we risk damaging our reputation as a school system and as a community? Why would we ignore all of this research? For what? For tradition? No tradition is worth such a price. Finally, I ask you to engage in a thought experiment. Imagine a student in one of our classrooms today. Her family is of Native American ancestry, and she loves school. Her parents, like all parents, have had a hard year. They've dealt with a lot, and they've delayed having the hard conversation with her about the logo she sees on her school gear and how it perpetuates the ugly history of our nation's treatment of her ancestors and their continued marginalization today. We have a choice tonight. Tonight, we can say to that student and her family that we did something, a small but meaningful thing, to acknowledge those wrongs by doing something right. Please, let's not waste that chance. Please support this motion and this process. Thank you.
I would just like to add, like I have said all along, I believe that all voices in town deserve to be heard in the most inclusive, equitable, and transparent way. And it doesn't appear that this evening that is going to happen. So I am not comfortable supporting any change until that does happen at the town ballot. Therefore, I am not going to be supporting this motion this evening. Yes, Darcy.
Yes, I just want to thank everyone for reaching out, and I've read all the emails, and I also believe that we, as a subcommittee, once this became a public issue and it had gone beyond just the school committee making a decision, I believe that our subcommittee did come up with a plan to engage and get input. And so, I believe that we've seen that process through, and that has been my only issue through all of this, was just fully understanding, once this became such a community-based issue and access to emails and access to all kinds of things, that it seemed like that we had to do some due diligence around, hearing the voices of as many people as possible. I believe that we've done that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, ironically, this is what I believed this whole time, even though, we have to move forward. And I, 100% support this motion. And honestly, that's been my belief system the whole time. It was more about the process. It was more about the transparency of the process once this became bigger than what it was actually probably ever supposed to be, so. And I appreciate everyone on this committee and everyone in the community and the teachers and staff and the administrators who have, taken part in this and made this happen. So, thanks.
Thank you, Darcy.
Yeah.
Tom, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amy. So in so many ways, I agree and appreciate with parts of what everyone has said. And let me start by noting Mike and Amy. There's nothing more important in behaviors that we as parents and adults, never mind as school committee members, should model than appropriate conduct, respect of each other, respect of open conversations, respect of agreeing to disagree. I couldn't agree more with all of that. In fact, I hope that that has been a hallmark of this process, at least among the 7 of us. And I hope it's been a hallmark of most of our work and our tenures on this committee on many different issues that have come before us. And I hope it remains a hallmark. So thank you for saying those things. I couldn't agree more. I do intend to support this motion. I do believe that it is incumbent upon us as elected officials to fulfill this responsibility that is before us. In support of even what Dr. Burns just mentioned moments ago. We articulated a process, we ran through it. It was open, it was clear, it was challenging, it was difficult, it was uncomfortable. And all of that is okay because we've landed in a place whereas we got some pretty engaging information, some pretty eye-opening information, some pretty powerful information about how much work we have left to do. But with that said, I do have a couple of thoughts to share with my colleagues in the community, if I may. I want to thank everyone for the many emails, letters, Facebook posts, and community engagement that has occurred in the last couple of months around this important topic. I think this matter in some ways is a conversation around the heart and the soul of Wakefield. And the strong viewership that we saw last week at the Native American panel, I think was incredibly impressive. Something like between 270 or 280 online participants. As an aside, if I could, with a little tongue in cheek to my colleagues, compare that with the next night, the public budget hearing, which had like the 7 of us looking at each other. But I digress for a moment, friends, with a little bit of levity. I think our panel last week was enlightening and powerful. We are on notice that we have much work ahead, but tonight we can take the next first step in that work. I support us voting to retire the current logo and affirm our support for staying Warriors. Retaining Warrior is an acknowledgement of tradition while engaging and empowering students to help shape a new look and a new future that they can call their own. I have to believe that being a proud warrior, whether past, current, or future, has more to do with student achievement on the field and in the classroom, mature sportsmanlike conduct, and respect for others than anything to do with the logo. It's not about a symbol of good behavior. It's about those actual behaviors. Next, my support for retiring the logo is founded and based in the word retirement, because I don't believe it's an elimination, nor should it be. It should be a retirement. Retirement speaks when a person, or in this case, a logo, has well served us, has served our town, has served our school, has served our people, and deserves to be remembered with the pride and joy that it brought. But as years go by and times change, it becomes time to move to the next phase of life. We can keep our pride in being warriors while respectfully retiring our logo and look forward to something new. My support for retiring the logo is also resolved in being mindful and respectful to the Native American community. This, to me, as echoed by other colleagues, is a fundamental civil and human right. People, especially, frankly, stereotypes of people, are not mascots or logos. That speaks very strongly to retirement. I believe that we can balance retiring, and we must balance retiring the Native American imagery with a thoughtful, respectful recognition of tradition and the role that Native American culture, lore, and the Baird family have provided to our community so proudly for so many years. I do hope in supporting this motion that the policy subcommittee comes back to us with some recommendations around a number of things that we've talked about tonight, but mostly including an outlook for Native American curriculum and an education plan, creating a permanent display of some sort that recognizes and honors Native Americans in the Beard family in this town and in our schools, and the means for empowering students to develop a new logo. I feel strongly that we're in a place. We have heard from so many voices on all sides of this issue, but it's time for us to make a decision. It's time for us to bring some clarity to expectations and hopes and desires. And I believe this issue is at our core of the future of the community in which we seek to empower, engage, and hand over to our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments or remarks? Seeing none, okay, roll call?
Ms. Purcell?
No.
Ms. Bear?
Yes.
Mr. Markham?
Yes.
Ms. Guida?
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau?
No.
Dr. Burns?
Yes.
Mr. Liakos?
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on with the agenda, budget reports, we don't have any. Some committee reports for finance and facilities, we did not meet last week, and we are planning to meet on Thursday. Labor, Tom.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, just as a labor, we have the subcommittee have not met since our last meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday morning, a week from today. We have a request from the WEA to begin some conversations around impact bargaining with the concerns around returning to school and the schedule that the principals discussed and brought forward this evening. So we're going to be beginning those conversations in earnest with WEA. And we'll obviously have reports to bring back to the full committee in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Student Services, Darcy.
We have not met either since the last meeting, and we're meeting next Friday. But we'll have a report for next meeting.
Next Thursday, next Wednesday, the 31st?
I'm sorry, next Wednesday. Yes.
Wednesday, yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's that? Policy and communications, do you have anything else to add, Colleen?
Yeah, Darcy, you're with me on Friday, if you can. But yeah, we have a plan to meet this coming Friday to discuss sort of the things that we just laid out, and hope to meet the next few Fridays as we're available so that we can present a more robust resolution at our 4/13 meeting. That's all, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 6th, actually. Is that correct?
So I don't think it is.
No.
No?
It's usually the second and the fourth.
The 13th.
Okay. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking at an old schedule.
Amy?
April, yes.
Because of, there's the Jewish holiday,
Right.
which is why we kept it on the 6th. And as well as the election.
It's
Would it be Passover?
No, it's okay, well, we'll look into it. But I don't know if it's in my calendar. Hold on one second. If we look at the 13th. Beginning
Is there
of
a Jewish
Ramadan.
holiday on April 13th?
Sorry, say that again, Tom.
Is there a Jewish holiday on April
No, I don't
13th?
think it's Jewish. It's the beginning of Ramadan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the 13th.
Did we recognize, not that it's not appropriate, but did we displace meetings? We may have. I didn't think that was part of the calendar. That's all. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I think the last calendar that I looked at, it was the 6th of April. So, yeah, I mean, more to follow on that. Because I do also think that we need to discuss when the second meeting would be, and I believe that because of the town election on the 27th. The school committee meeting is generally on that Wednesday, the 28th.
Amy?
So, yeah.
Amy, Ramadan starts on Monday, April 12th and goes through May 12th.
I can't imagine that we would have changed a meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
So without apologies, okay.
Okay. Yep. Again, I might have been looking at an old calendar. So
that would almost say we should be meeting on April 6th because we don't want to meet on April 13th. Does that make sense?
I mean that was the logic for me saying the 6th. But again, we'll straighten that out. I really don't know if we've done it in the past.
Yeah, I think we can take a look at it squarely
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, more to follow on that. So thank you. School committee comments. Greg?
Sorry. Yes, thanks, Amy. I just wanted to flag, I'm hoping we can have a conversation about whether the school committee should adopt a resolution vis-a-vis MCAS and standardized testing that other school committees have adopted. And I'd like to get that on the agenda for our next meeting.
Thank you. Was that all you had?
Yes, thanks, Amy.
Great, thanks. Darcy?
Well, the only comments I want to make, which I should have said before the principals left, but it's really impressive, the plans that have been put in place for the return to school. And it was really impressive to hear all of those reports. So hopefully someone, right, Will or Doug or Kara, you can express my gratitude and very impressed. So thank you for all that hard work.
Thank you, Darcy. Mike?
Sure. I just wanted to thank everybody. This has been an arduous process beyond belief. So I want to thank all of us. I'm sure we've gotten on each other's nerves once in a while, as families often do in that regard. So, I certainly respect the decision that took place tonight, and we'll move forward. But I appreciate everybody, and if I frustrated anybody, my apologies. But I think we're hopefully all better for it at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Tom.
Thank you, Amy. Let me, if I may, echo 100% of what Mike just said. Thank you for saying that, Mike, and I couldn't agree more. Let me also, Amy, thank you for, again, this has been one of the most difficult years in education history. Not to exaggerate, but I think that's probably a darn close statement. Having had the honor of being chair of this committee in the past, it pales in comparison to the types of issues that you have had to deal with, and you've done it with grace, with dignity, with respect for all, and I thank you, really thank you for that, and congratulate you. And I know this isn't anywhere near your last meeting, but I'm going to miss you and miss the grace in that you bring to the table. Thank you all tonight.
Thank you, Tom. Colleen.
I think that my colleagues and you, Amy, have really said it all for tonight, and I appreciate everyone's participation. And I know these meetings for our public are long, but they're important, and I urge you to continue to participate in our meetings going forward. We love having you here, so good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Susie.
I'm all set.
Thank you. And again, I will just like to echo everyone here as well. And I really do appreciate your comments, Tom, very much. So thank you for expressing your compliments. And I just want to congratulate Superintendent Lyons and Kara and the great work with our amazing business manager, Christine Bufagna. You know, for just working so endlessly, or working endless hours in regards to, you know, coming up with and developing this budget. So congratulations to you guys tonight. So with that, do we have a motion?
I closed my computer. I move that we
move that the school committee
move that the school committee adjourn this meeting of March 23rd, 2021. It is really late, you guys. I'm like practically asleep, clearly. So sorry.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call. Judy.
Ms. Purcell.
Yes.
Ms. Bayer.
Yes.
Mr. Markham.
Yes.
Ms. Guida.
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau.
Absolutely yes.
Dr. Burns.
Yes.
Mr. Liakos.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting for this evening. I hope you all have a great night. Thank you for joining.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.